What's up, everyone? Don't forget to leave your feedback and enjoy the story. A picture of the game and information with "Congratulations on finishing" it were displayed on the screen. The hero declared that he had finished it. Clenching his fist, the man in the blue hoodie claimed to have done it. He finished it. He declared that he had finally finished the game and joyously waved his fists. Commentators said he was insane for doing it before anyone else in the globe. The game splash screen featuring a 𝗘𝗲𝗃 brandishing a sword was the next pundit to congratulate. 10 years after its debut, someone managed to finish this game, which highlights the incredible challenge of empire defense. And the protagonist is this individual. The chair rolled on the ground. No matter how challenging the game is, it must be finished, the hero said, grinning as he held the microphone. He streams. The camera had a red glow. A streamer who exclusively plays the channel's hardest games. With 2.34 million subscribers and 172 videos. Splash Screen earned him the moniker Classic Nerd. The man thanked the $300 donor for his kindness while sitting in front of the monitor. The hero laughed and said, "It's all because of them. They put in a lot of effort." The first person to finish this ridiculously challenging game, which no one else has finished in 10 years since its release, was a classic nerd. The brunette said, "To be honest, his playing technique is a little off," while closing his eyes. "No, it's really awesome. For a gamer, there is no greater accomplishment." Surprised, the man glanced at the monitor. If there was anything he regretted, he thought it was the comment that 𝗧𝗍𝗪𝗃𝗃 death in the last battle for an AR ranked character was sad. She experienced a lot. Sadly, the brunette said nothing. He pictured the character in front of the vanquished boss in a corpse-filled hallway. The subscribers hoped that all of the characters would survive the last battle. But the hero wasn't sure if this was because they had grown attached to the characters while he was playing. But everyone ultimately perished, with the exception of Lucas, the main character. Looking at the screen, the streamer realized that his objective was not to finish without suffering any losses. The last location was finished, as indicated by a notification on the screen. Lucas is the stage MVP. Iron Man mode challenges were overcome. The final boss is a princess who can't sleep. And one player in the world is known as a classic nerd. The game had ended. Lucas was the only one still standing in the same spot. The character stood in front of the monster and the boss he had killed atop the mountain, which was composed of both enemy and ally corpses. The hero silently bowed his head and wondered, why is that? He observed the pixel figure and believed that, in spite of the fact that Lucas appeared somewhat dejected from behind, but he was merely a character in the game. This is the end, according to the system. The credits stated that the Empire Defense logo had appeared. Mr. A.B. Brunette, the creative director, game director, and art director, leaned on his hand and expressed some resentment. On the screen, he saw a message. It stated that he is not owed a prize or anything similar by the developer. Why would they give him a reward? The man asked with a smile. The commentator retorted that they were chastised for the game's extreme difficulty. But since he demonstrated that it is possible to finish the game, he should be rewarded. It was a glowing system unit. With a wave of his hand, the classic nerd expressed his curiosity about what he was discussing. He questioned why they would reward him. He doesn't require it. He doesn't need anything else as long as he can enjoy himself with subscribers in this way. Commentators described the avarice in his eyes. Another stated that if he were offered something, he would gladly accept it. They all saw how much he desired a reward, according to another. The brunette thought to himself that Mr. had long since vanished and waved his hand, declaring that everything was wrong. He realized that he hadn't created a sequel in 10 years as he studied the game disc. Thinking there was no way to get in touch with him, the hero reclined in his chair. He was astounded to see a notification from Mr. A, the director, who introduced himself as the director of Empire Defense and greeted Mr. Classic Nerd. The man glanced at the alert. His shocked eyes grew wide. There were a lot of question marks from the commenters. Mr. A wrote that he wanted to start by expressing gratitude. Thinking that nobody could succeed, he had already given up. The man asked himself, is he really real? As he gazed at the screen, M went on to say that he was truly relieved to see that he had succeeded and thanked him once more. The streamer said there was no need to express gratitude while scratching his temple. The next message, which stated that the director was happy that there was still hope, caught his attention. Hope, he thought. What is he defending the Empire against? While seated at the computer, the hero read in bewilderment that he had demonstrated his value and skill. He was invited to assist them by the director. The man's eyes reflected the monitor. He believed that someone was merely seeking attention. The game's creator couldn't have been on his stream. He ought to give him a kick. Grinning, the man asked the director, or perhaps I should say the self-described director. The screen's message turned yellow. A classic nerd chuckled, claiming that this was all he was saying at the moment. But he was unable to complete it. Confused, he asked what was causing everything to blur in front of his eyes. The hero inquired as to what was happening. Thinking he had played for too long, he started to collapse to the ground. Before his eyes, the monitors were becoming hazy. The man was able to convince himself that if he passed out, the subscribers would call for assistance. A thank you image for playing Empire Defense appeared on the screen. Gratitude was becoming hazy. Green cannonballs were hurtling ahead. The man's eyes grew wide with disbelief. He sat up and screamed while wearing a uniform. He looked ahead in disbelief and wondered what the sound was. A portion of the tower in front of him had broken off and was flying directly towards him. Wondering what that was, the brunette let out a terrified scream. He put his hands over his head, but a stone fell close by. The hero grimaced as he examined his gloved palm. He was on one knee. There was smoke coming from the cannon. The man covered his nose, wondering if the fuse had ignited a gunpowder odor. The hero was shocked to witness the knights firing the cannon. He looked at it with dismay as he crawled away in terror. The man winced when he heard an explosion nearby. He screamed for them to stop right away as he turned around in frustration. His eyes suddenly grew wide with shock. He noticed roses and a red flag with a sword. He was shocked to see the armored knights holding flags and wondered what this meant. In the midst of the conflict, the hero was seated on the ground. The knight was yelling at them to stay put. The brunette was silent and stunned. He wondered what was happening as he observed the explosions in front of him. The knights were firing. The fighters' teeth were clenched. The brunette was taken aback and wondered if they were actually engaged in combat. Startled, one of the knights turned around. Calling the hero, "Your Imperial Highness," he rushed over to him. The quintessential nerd gave him a curious glance. The mustachioed knight rushed up and yelled, inquiring as to how the master was doing. Thinking this was an enemy soldier, the man opened his mouth in disbelief. He yelled at him to stay away as he crawled away. The man reiterated that he shouldn't approach the knight, who was taken aback. He glanced at the shaking warrior. Surprised, someone bowed down to his highness, apologized, and threw away the sword. The man's cheeks were streaming with tears. He pleaded for forgiveness. Surprised, the hero stared at him, wondering what was wrong with this elderly man. The man started to stand up. He called the kneeling knight as he got closer. As he asked him to calm down, a green whirlwind materialized in front of him. The brunette stared in disbelief at the explosion. He was knocked back by the explosion's shockwave. The hero fell to the ground. He was trembling, struggling to stand, and coughing in disbelief. He thought it was a bomb when he looked down. His palm flashed green. The rising green flame caught the hero's attention. Surprised, he inquired as to what was happening. Everyone was called here by the man in armor. "The enemy is attacking," the knight said, holding out his hand. The hero gave him a look. The soldier asked to stop them, pointing his finger in surprise, not to allow them to scream and get up. He launched an assault. The movement of the sword left a mark. The knight's eyes widened in surprise. He was pierced by a swift force. The hero marveled at what he saw. The warrior's severed arm and armor bounced off the ground after being pierced by a sharp spike. It landed next to the man, splattering blood. Blood flew to his cheek in drops. He gazed fearfully at the severed limb. The knights are pierced by sharp black spikes. This was noticed by the traditional nerd seated on the ground. He cursed and scowled, wondering in his mind what was behind this wall. Ahead, a spider materialized. It turned out that the black spikes were its claws. A massive black monster was on its way. It had glowing red eyes. It snarled and opened its mouth. A classic nerd put his hands over his ears. Knights yelled that they were there as they sprinted in their direction, wincing. The man gave the order to render him immobile. They were dispersed by the monster. The classic nerd was trembling in terror, believing that his hands and body were trembling. He still believed that it was stationary. The ground was being broken by sharp pincers. The man's pupil reflected the spider's eyes. He questioned whether he was having hallucinations or if this was a dream. He was being approached by a massive monster. The hero declared that the entire circumstance was too amazing. The spider lifted its razor-sharp paw. The man believed that it wasn't a joke. The monster launched a swift attack. The streamer thought it was funny to die in this manner as they stared at it in terror. He was called by a blonde man who materialized in front of him. Denying reality left a bright trace from his movement, he said, drawing his sword. The blonde man had blue glowing eyes. He swiftly used a shining sword to strike the spider. He was cut in half by the blow. Grinning, the blonde knight turned to face the brunette. He inquired as to whether he believed it to be a cliché. The hero gave him a startled look. The knight's gaze grew wide. He took a seat beside him and questioned His Highness about his appearance. Excitedly, he asked if there was any pain. The brunette thought his face was quite familiar. He pointed to the pixel character and asked, startled, "Lucas?" The brunette gave him a startled look and said, "I know I wiped away my tears, but I hurt my head." He took the startled brunette by the forearm and expressed his satisfaction at finally addressing him by name. He served him all his life, but he was never able to recall his name. A classic nerd marveled at him. The blonde cast a curious glance back. The man scowled, turned, and thought as he believed this to be the real Lucas. Is it possible that he looked up? Explosions illuminated the heroes as they stood atop the tower. There was a fortress ahead. There were fire and spiders everywhere. Surprised, the man thought. He was shaking inside Empire Defense. Brunette nibbled on his lips. He believed that everything was terrible. This was one of the hardest games ever. He pictured the scene that had been cut and believed that he had finished it right before he arrived. Empire Defense. The spider's limbs were covered in green slime. Many spiders were running forward. The hero thought it was a game where he had to kill endlessly. The spiders were covered in green slime. Endless hordes of monsters rushing in. The guy turned around, his mouth hanging open. He thought this was a game with a damn complicated defense mechanic. The hero thought why green slime was secreted on the spider's back. Drops of poisonous slime flew into the tower. Green explosions appeared from the collision. The hero shielded himself from the flash with his hands. He scowled, wondering why in the world he was in a game. When Lucas called the brunette, he turned around. The brunette was grasped by the shoulders by an armored hand that landed on his shoulder. The blonde claimed that an army of black spiders was currently attacking them. The fortress door was being approached by a group of spiders. Although these spiders are dormant, Lucas stated that they might lose the forward operating base. The mountains were illuminated by the setting sun after sunset. The knight pulled out his sword after he said it would set in half an hour. The heroes with the sword in their hands were being approached by spiders. The blonde requested to wait as long as possible until the end of the time. The brunette thought, "Why is he trying to protect me?" As she looked at him, His Imperial Highness is what they refer to him as. Now who is he? In the shadows, smoke could be seen. Lucas kept the sword hidden. Shouting that he was still breathing, the knight sat by the injured. A stretcher was requested by someone. The sun had finally set, according to the blonde, who was covered in green slime. The black spider army withdrew. He called the man after giving him a quick glance. The Brett turned to face the future. Unfortunately, there were spiders at the base of the fortress. Spears and arrows protruded from the monsters' bodies. The classic nerd turned to face the blonde and asked him where he was and what day it was. Standing beside him, Lucas responded that it was the final day of February. 649, the so-called fortress city was a forward operating base situated at the intersection, according to the imperial calendar. The brunette gritted his teeth and announced that tomorrow was March 1st, 649. The blonde affirmed. According to the imperial calendar, the player believed that the monster attack on the forward operating base occurred on March 1st, 649. He scowled, realizing that this was a very familiar circumstance. In a very familiar spot, the man bit his lip. Near the towers, red flags were flying. The hero believed he had been playing Empire Defense while sitting for 6 months. He had completed the tutorial here hundreds of times on the same story date. The man exclaimed that he was Ash as he gazed in wonder at his hands. When the blonde inquired once more, the man claimed to be 𝗧𝗵𝗲𝗽𝗍, ever black, and slapped himself on the chest. When the knight confirmed, he crushed his head in shock. Why him? He wondered in his head. The hero recalled the figure on the horse. with the flag in his hands, and believed that this was the 𝗘𝗵𝗲𝗁, prince of the empire, the worst commander, who caused a great number of soldiers to perish in the fortress city. He thought that the character who died the most horrible death in the story was the brunette who was devoured by a spider. Because 𝗏 was now him, the hero clenched his teeth angrily and questioned why. Ahead was a gray structure that served as the commander's personal dorm. After glancing in the mirror, the hero yelled angrily, insulting 𝗏 and pleading with him to remain motionless. What made him protrude his head? Sassy nerd. 𝗏 exhaled deeply, scratched his head, and declared that he was losing his mind. He pictured the opening of the game, stating that Empire Defense, a classic defense game, is known as something impassable. He envisioned the logo with the red demon, hell, and the difficulty level. He then presented a shield with swords and a helmet, stating that, along with the game's difficulty was dubbed Iron Man Hell, and the screen congratulated him on finishing the game. Iron Man mode, which forcibly saves his progress, combined both. The only person who finished this mode was the hero. It appears that he doesn't give a damn when he vanishes from the game. He believes he can find a way out and has faith in his skills. The man screamed when 2 system windows appeared next to him. Aside from this and the tutorial, he believed it was impossible to finish this location. He pictured a group of monsters and characters perched atop a tower. The tutorial was created so that the player would always fail. What? Because Lucas escapes the monster invasion by himself at the start of the story. He pictured a monster with a woman's body on top of a spider's body and reason that you can only begin hunting an army of black spiders after 1.5 years in this game, which has a 3-year plot. And how is he going to overcome hundreds of these monsters? 𝗏 slapped his cheeks and told himself to calm down right away. Thinking he had already won this game, he opened his eyes with determination. The heroes looked ahead, believing that he would undoubtedly be able to find a way out if he combined his knowledge and experience. The man looked anxiously at the blue information window, thinking that there was no escape route. With blue windows all around him, he chuckled uneasily, believing he was in danger. The location's adversaries were listed by the system as 01 Black Spider Queen of Unknown, 196 Black Spider Destroyers of level 55 and 912 Black Spider Assailants of level 60, level 55, 60, and there are more than 1,000 of them. The brunette inquired in awe. What is this? The only thing that can be used, aside from the strength of the fortress wall at the very bottom, is a mnemonic cannon, he said angrily as he glanced at the artifact window. A prehistoric mon cannon. What do they want him to do? The player believed that their chances of winning were insufficient. The best chance of success, and told himself to unwind. He pictured the Empire Defense logo and reasoned that it would be impossible to simply save and restart a game in this mode. The entire game will be destroyed if the player makes a mistake. Therefore, it is crucial to calculate each action down to the millisecond. In front of the man's palm, numerous system windows appeared. After 6 months of playing this game, he believed he had come to a realization. There is always a way to survive, and you must take action in any circumstance. Ahead were a lot of blue windows. 𝗵𝗺𝗃 believed that he required something that had a marginally better chance of surviving. His eyes reflected the system windows. The palm froze in front of the blue window as he considered something he could be somewhat certain of. In awe, the man extended his finger, believing that this was it. Lucas yelled, and the man pushed the door. He came in and inquired about Lucas's whereabouts. He was here, according to the blonde standing behind the door. What is causing it to turn around? He was told by 𝗏 to assemble a squad under his direct control as soon as possible. The blonde was taken aback and remained silent until squad, that is, his guards, asked. The prince had never called them before, the blonde said, glancing at him. Why did the brunette yell at him to stop talking so abruptly? With a determined expression, he pointed a finger at the man and declared that he had figured out a way to win. The chair was pushed back by the hand. After taking a seat, 𝗏 asked, "Is everyone here?" While crossing his arms. In front of him were 4 individuals. The player thought they were familiar faces as they gazed at them. The girl with the red hair and staff grinned a little. Lily was the one. The knight with dark hair was scowling. Ken was that. The glasses-wearing man was sitting with his knees hugged. Damien was that. The hero recalled wearing headphones while seated at the computer. thinking that he would recognize these faces. He pictured the characters encircled by red light and believed that he had witnessed numerous instances in which they perished. With his head buried in his knees, Damien sat. Someone asked, "Why is he curled up into a ball?" The man wearing the glasses had tears in his eyes. Lily turned and asked for understanding, explaining that he was acting this way because he had lost a comrade today. After going through the game tutorial, the classic nerd realized he was in the same state. He pictured a pixel character encircled by a purple aura and believed that he died first because he had a peculiar status from the start. He recalls that despite being a healer, the most crucial role, he was unable to use these abilities. 𝗧𝗿𝗃𝗃𝗃 agreed, staring at him. Seated at the table, he informed the heroes that he would begin by outlining their responsibilities for the following day. The girl with the staff answered when he turned to face Lily. The redhead, who belongs to the mage class and whose element is fire, was encircled by flames. She can hit with a series of potent spells and is the group's primary damage dealer. When the girl learned that she would be their shield, she was taken aback, allowing her to act as a tank to block the spider's attacks. I was shocked to learn that she was a mage. Hearing what worries him, Ken crossed his arms. He carried a sword and a shield as he stood among the monsters. He can hold opponents at the forefront because he is a shielder. He uses the ability to draw attention before using his body to inflict harm. He is a tank, to put it briefly. When the brunette learned that he would need to sneak into the middle of the enemy formation and stir things up there, she was astounded. The man sat on his knees and his face. One of the most crucial classes in the game is he is a healer. He heard that he would now be a shooter in this squad and raised his head. He will fire at the most crucial targets. When the blonde learned that he would be the last to lead the troops and keep up the front line, he scowled. The heroes stared at the Emperor in silence. The man considered what was happening. They might say something. Ken gritted his teeth in anger. He yelled while slamming his fist against the wall. Why does he refer to this as a plan? The man yelled angrily and demanded, was all of this something he was serious about? Because of a bad squad, he put them all in danger, and he still talks gibberish. The man was embarrassed and remained silent, believing it wasn't him. That awful person was the culprit. Ash, maybe this sounds like a lot of nonsense. Thinking that this was a place that could not be reached by conventional means, he pictured a wooden door. Therefore, you must go insane in order to get past this crazy place. Ash then gave Ken a call. He believed he would not back down. He asked the Supreme Commander and the Emperor's son, his eyes blazing. As he went on, the man's eyes glowed red. How could he break the chain of command? The heroes were terrified and froze. Ken was shaking, with a glow surrounding him. He turned to face the irate man and started defending himself. Because the man in front of him was a total lunatic, Ash believed he was doing well. Ultimately, it would be over for him if he lost his hold. The hero got out of his seat. Lily gave him a curious glance. Ash grasped the dagger's hilt and swung it sharply, thinking that his plan was utterly reckless. He believed that he had to force them to comply. He struck the girl in the shoulder without daring to protest. The guys were astounded by what they saw. Lily shuddered with terror. There was a glowing lamp beneath the ceiling. With a smile, Ash inquired, "Are they all able to finish the tasks that have been assigned to them?" He was in a psycho's body, so why wouldn't he behave like one? The hero used a blade to jab Lily in the shoulder. The guys who were observing this thought he was insane. Ken thought the prince had truly gone insane as he looked forward with excitement. Was he truly unaware of the value of a mage? He glanced at the stern brunette and wondered how anyone could fight under such a leader. The blade was surrounded by fire. Surprised, the girl glanced at her blazing shoulder. Everyone in the room observed what was going on in surprise and described it. Yes, that's it, Ash grinned. He is unsure whether the developer included it by mistake. Pixel figures were introduced by the player, who claimed that each of the initial characters had special abilities that were entirely at odds with their roles. Glancing at the girl, he questioned her about how a group of goblins had invaded her village as a child, wounding her with a blade. Lily heard that she had acquired the skill of fire skin following that incident, and she looked pitifully at the flaming blade. According to the system, fire skin is a skill developed out of a fear of sharp objects. She could use fire to protect herself from physical assaults. 1 MP is used for each use of the skill. She can protect herself from any physical assault as long as she has enough mana. When the prince questioned whether he was correct, the girl nearly started crying. She was encircled by fire, the primary damage dealer's tank skill. In the game, there was no way to use it, but in real life, things are different. Around the tip, the skin was burning. Ash was going to make the most of this skill, a place that is unpassable. He grinned, realizing that using cheats would be his only option. He grinned menacingly, believing that the person who threw him here would simply watch him pass this game before grabbing him by the collar and spanking him. Ash put the dagger away and expressed regret for using such a crude method of proof. Lily gave him a pitying glance and assured him that everything was all right. However, how did he find out? It didn't matter, the brunette retorted. He turned to face 𝗫𝗀𝗃, who gave him a terrified look. There were many mouths to feed in the family, and the man heard that he was a small-time thief growing up in the slums. Yes, the hero is certain that he could become a knight with ease, with the dagger in his hands. Ash responded to Kin's worried question about how he knew that it didn't matter. What counts is how he can apply his abilities. The pickpocket survival techniques were displayed in a system window. He can conceal his presence in the face of danger thanks to a habit from his time as a small-time thief. Avoid attention uses a lot of XP each time. When the Emperor asked if he could turn invisible whenever he wanted to avoid attention, the man eagerly responded. With a smile, Ash waved his blade and told him to respond. Or should he provide another illustration? Shouting that he shouldn't, Kin bowed. He could, and he was correct. The prince declared it to be all right. In that scenario, he could also execute his command. Squeezing his weapon, the hero uttered those words. At last, he took a look. The man seated near the wall uttered his name. He moved to the front. The hero believed that Damien was the most crucial component of his scheme. Sitting on one knee, the brunette asked him if he had exceptionally good vision. He questioned why he could see his friend's demise so vividly. Damien cast a downward glance. He claimed that they were raised in the same orphanage and were from the same city. He stared ahead in disbelief. His companion was moving in the direction of the spider. The man claimed that he gave his life for him during the conflict, which is why Damien sobbed and questioned why His Highness had brought them here. Ash heard the question, what great goal was he pursuing? And said nothing. Kin glanced at his allies and questioned whether they were just toys in the room with him. Lucas has returned. Damien screamed for his friend to be returned, bowed down, and begged for Van to return. On the grave, a flower was growing. Ash placed his hand on the boy's shoulder and gave him a serious look. He said he was free to blame him if he so desired. He could even hate him. When the boy learned that his friend Van had given his life to save him, he started crying. Would he just sit here and wait to die? Ash scowled and went on. Just because he was about to die due to a foolish commander, did he really want to give up the life that his friend had sacrificed? He needed to seize every chance. The hero shrugged his shoulders and explained that he had to exact revenge. Ash cried out for him to kill the spiders and hit his chest. Leave this place alive and give him a lesson. Damien put his hand on his shoulder and said, yes, when asked if he wanted to kill these spiders. Ash asked if he wanted to murder him. His round glasses reflected the light. The man said nothing before responding in the affirmative. In surprise, the heroes heard this. With a smile, the hero declared that this was fantastic. He nodded. He vowed that Damien would be the one to kill him if they managed to escape this place unharmed. Lucas would yell angrily whenever that occurred. The brunette extended his hand and declared that they would all perish, regardless of the success of the plan. He would allow him to end his own life if that occurred. Ash grinned and vowed to uphold the imperial family's honor. After hearing the request for just one day to obey his commands, Damien Sto stopped crying. Hatred can be a motivator at times. Damien bowed his head. He got up and stood behind the prince, who believed that even if this anger was aimed at him. Gazing down, Ash declared that he would not offer an explanation for his error. They nearly decimated their army. He envisioned a massive swarm of spiders telling them that if they did as he said, they would be able to chase them away. There was a possibility for victory, even if it was slim. Thus, the prince urged that you believe him and follow his instructions just once. Looking ahead, at last, his squad, his right hand, is put together. The heroes gave Ash a serious look. He believed that he was unsure if this hand would be a royal straight, a flush, or simply garbage on the fortress's walls. They were knights. Ash believed that he was forced to wager everything, shouting that a marching army of black spiders was approaching. A soldier struck the gong. Ash was asked by one of the knights if he would truly be all right. In response, he told them not to worry and to follow his instructions. The black spiders raced ahead. The strategy was straightforward. Green growths appeared on the spider's body as the comrades were buying time. After locating the queen, who issues commands, the knight loaded the cannon. Ash believed that this Mona cannon would blast her head off. Nearby were pieces of the limiter. They have greatly enhanced her magical strength by taking out the restriction. She ought to be able to harm even the queen now. The placement was the only issue. Ahead was a blue sky and a valley. From such a close distance, it was impossible to see the queen. This was just not possible with human sight. So what? With a little smile, Ash stated that they had to make a map. He was standing next to a sparkling blue fence. The area, including a portion of the tower, was traversed by a vivid blue line. Like a blue shield, it glistened in the distance. The rabbit in the woodland was penetrated by the curtain. Ash glanced at the information panel in blue. His talent was making maps, a feature that lets you view the whole region as a miniature map. The man glanced at the information window and saw that Ash, the title of the nasty prince, fell into the beginner category. Each of the following traits was present: strength, agility, intelligence, endurance, and mono. The heroes believed that he was taken aback by these poor statistics at first. Thankfully, the skill was at least maintained. His hand froze over the tiny map. He believed he would discover her hiding place. If only he could locate Mark, the boss. The boy's eyes grew wide with disbelief. He assumed that Mark, the boss, was not present as he studied the map. The enemy queen was the mission's goal. The spiders were running towards the castle. She was not shown on the map. Ken stood at the opening gate. He remembered Ash giving him vials of red liquid and telling him that he had collected all the stamina potions left in the fortress. Let him go out, disrupt, and attract attention. The worried man heard the question. Will he cope with this? In the basement, small stones were falling from the ceiling. Lily was shaking with a pitiful look. She remembered the prince saying that he had a painful role for her. The girl stood in the center of the room, remembering his words that if the spiders penetrated the artillery unit, he expected her to use the skill fire skin and block the entrance. The girl told herself that she could handle it. She could do it. She could manage it, the girl told herself. She was capable of it. Lucas shouted to the positions while glancing ahead. Crossbows were taken by the knights. On the wall were cannons. The blonde swung his blade. He yelled, "They must hold out," as he observed the hordes of spiders. They must buy some time until the queen is vanquished by His Highness. His Highness has finished all the preparations, he said, turning to face the prince. This proud expression undoubtedly means he raised his sword. Ash was terrified at this point and thought he wasn't prepared as he stared at the blue screen. Arrows were flying and cannons were firing. The spiders exploded when they heard the order to fire. Lucas approved of the explosions. The tower's brunette gave him a silent glance. He felt that he had to maintain his composure. He believed that the training's objective was not to kill the boss and visualized a mark on the map in the shape of a demon. Therefore, the fact that it was missing from the map was not surprising. The brunette believed that the queen would likely show up, following a full-scale assault as she watched the battle play out. They have guards ready in case of emergencies and a dependable rear. Therefore, the queen can only be here. He called Damien while pointing at red dots on the map. He inquired as to whether he could see the finger pointing to the gap between the mountains. The glasses-wearing man said he could see spiders sitting there doing nothing. Ash believed it was feasible, but might he be turning his head? He requested that the queen be one of them. Could he locate her? Damien's eyes glistened. He asked, "Is he talking about a monster whose upper part is from a person and the lower part is from a spider?" After spotting a red-eyed monster wearing a crown, she's standing by the cannon, Ash thought, grinning. According to him, it was Damien heard that. There was no reason to be afraid after noticing that it appeared a little frightening. She would soon be struck by the cannon and perish. When the boy gave the order to turn the artillery mount with the muzzle facing the southwest, Damien, and aim, the cannon moved. The warrior declared that the Mona charging was finished after glancing at the cannon. On order, they would fire. The prince turned to face the younger and instructed him to take it. With shaking hands, The boy grasped the handle and called, "Ash." The boy said he wasn't sure he could handle it while giving him a pitiful look. He was forcing himself to do something he had never done before. Abruptly, the prince put his hand on Damien's shoulder and called out to him. He declared that he would accept full responsibility even if he missed. The brunette looked at him and said it didn't matter if he failed and ruined everything. He would accept full accountability. The commander always has the final say. The soldiers only carry out orders. The glasses-wearing man was shocked to learn that all he had to do was pull the trigger. Sean let him keep in mind that he was using the 𝗧𝗵𝗲𝗽𝗃𝗲 skill to exact revenge on Van Damien's eyes. He pulled the trigger in his own direction and repeated the avenging Van. Manhwa's blue glow enveloped the cannon. The gears were turning. Lightning bolts were present at the muzzle. "That's how it was," Ash said, grinning. A mana charge shot ahead. "Beat them to death," the player said. Mana shot out of the cannon in a blue beam. A glow-encircled core flew quickly. It soared far ahead. Ash balled his fists and yelled for them to come. Ahead, there was an explosion. The scout was staring through the telescope when the prince turned to face her. The projectile struck the target and landed in the middle of the monster crowd. The knight said, raising his hand. Damien was praised by the warrior, who threw his arm over his shoulder. Whether it was the first time or he was lying, let him confess. In response, he said that he just followed instructions while surrounded by knights. The man claimed that his body started moving on its own as soon as he pulled the trigger. Ash turned to face him and considered what he was saying. It's all because of his talent. This ability emerged by the error of God. He is able to see and strike anything he desires. Precision plus 999. The player believed that this was an unusual ability that made it possible to consistently hit the target. Ash thought he was a character in the game who was unable to hold a weapon in his hand, so he covered his smile with his hand. However, all he had to do was touch it for them to witness his full power. The brunette gazed forward in awe. A large number of spiders materialized in front. "What is it readied?" he wondered. The hero wondered why the spiders were still moving as they got closer. The scout expressed fear that they would arrive. The brunette pivoted, wondering why. "There is a swarm of spiders moving right here," he said, pointing with his finger. He gritted his teeth and peered through the telescope. Ahead, a spider queen materialized. Ash thought, "Is this a square formation?" As he observed the swarm of spiders, the spider queen parted her teeth. The brunette's eyes gleamed as she shrank in terror. The spiders were heading in the direction of the castle. They were drawing nearer. Inquiries were heard. Where do they intend to go? They're getting closer. The soldiers in the rear questioned why they hadn't seen the queen. Was that the intended outcome? The prince expressed amazement that it was not possible. The scout exclaimed that it was a nightmare as she peered through the telescope. A massive swarm of spiders was on its way. According to the warrior, the spiders were directly aimed at the artillery unit. She sent her orders too soon, Ash cursed. Burning, the man swore. From behind the castle wall, shells were flying. WS. Feeling the bottle with his hand, the hero stiffened. There was only one potion left, he realized. Ken took cover behind a tree. Big spiders flew past him. He considered running away. The tree's leaves were ripped off by a gust of wind. Ken reached for his sword. He took a step, not knowing what it was. From behind the tree, he peered out. Silence, silence. A brilliant light filled the sky. The hero in Damien's eyes was blinded by an explosive mushroom rose that burst into the sky. He observed that the target was struck squarely in the bullseye. Ash stood rigidly. Spiders were tearing down the wall. He noticed that they continued to move. Monster was standing in the smoke. There was still the Spider Queen. The idea that they were undamaged made him clench his teeth. Standing among her brethren was the Spider Queen. He believed that the original Black Spider Queen would have perished in just 1 or 2 blows. He didn't know anything about the queen of this tutorial location, but she wasn't as powerful as the fighting-type mobs. His pupils contracted. If her stats were entirely different, he thought. What if she possessed a unique ability that prevented her from being killed? In that situation, what should he do? His Imperial Majesty was addressed by someone. The blue energy was spreading. He had heard that the cannon would soon reach its limit because of the monocore's powerful explosion. The soldier went on to say that it had also sustained significant damage and that they would not be able to fire as much as they had anticipated. The hero cut him off, claiming that he was talking too much, and inquiring as to how many more shots they could take. In a worried response, the soldier said that they had fired twice out of a total of 5 times, leaving 3 remaining. Ash only gave himself roughly 3 shots because he was unprepared for this response. Observing the battlefield, he came to the conclusion that they had to eliminate the Spider Queen in these 3 shots. In addition, he considered Damien, whose eyes were crimson. 1,000 miles away, the eyes appeared to have a side effect. With a maximum of 3 shots, he grasped the lever with his hand. The Emperor stood beside him, wondering if he could endure. Up until that point, the throng of spiders heard a huge explosion. Luckily, the central castle's walls were performing admirably. There was a cry that the destroyer was on its way. The hero pondered in disbelief. On the battlefield, a massive spider destroyer materialized. His Majesty observed the destroyer attempting to penetrate. There was nothing like this in the game, he said with a curse. He gave the order to defend, focusing all of the fire on the destroyers. Vol let out a cry. Shells struck the destroyer. But this was insufficient because he was already very near. The castle's walls gave way. A portion of the wall was destroyed by the destroyer. The destroyer was followed inside by spiders. The courtyard started to fill with them. Ash stood stunned. Lucas took his sword from its sheath and gave the order to use it. They were heading to the first floor. The man turned to the soldiers and told them to unite. Since the creatures below were defending them, they needed to keep firing at the queen until they got to the artillery unit. He scowled and declared with assurance that they would undoubtedly kill her. The fortress wall was illuminated by the sun's rays. Everything was ready. The Emperor faced Damien. He made use of his skills. A flaming mushroom shot into the sky as a shot was fired. He verified that the queen had been hit, but she remained alive. His Majesty gave the order to reload the cannon as soon as possible in preparation for the next shot. Lucas delivered another blow with his sword. He chopped off a number of spiders. He gave the order to defend the artillery. They had a duty to keep the Imperial Prince safe. Ash swore. Observing from the courtyard tower, soldiers engaged in combat with a swarm of spiders. A soldier was slain. 1 more came after. The number of casualties kept rising. On the blue screen, Ash noticed the casualty count. He was unaware. He shifted the mouse over to the other side of the table. Another soldier lost their life while participating in a game in which they are all actual people. 142 soldiers had died, according to the message displayed on the screen. Death is more than a numerical value. He closed the status window amid heartbreaking screams and foul odors. How fast is that? To cool the cannon, one of the soldiers gave the order for the others to place their hands on it. Everything will fall apart after 5 shots. They'll barely make it to 4. The knight moved forward. There were spider stains on his armor. Horrified, the Majesty considered what to do and how to escape this predicament. The attacks by swarms of spiders persisted. The route did not even cross my mind. Someone cursed at the spiders, drawing attention to himself. He screamed that he was right here as he stood in the rays of light. Ash also noticed him. This hero wiped the leftovers from his lips after taking a sip from the vial. He was identified as kin by the Emperor. He identified himself as a knight of the Empire. As night fell, the soldier's attention was diverted by the spiders. He was adamant. He ran away from the adversaries in front of them. A tall rock stood in front of them. The knight grinned. He said, "Why don't they try to find him behind it?" The pickpocket survival method skill was activated. The blue screen displayed it to the Emperor. Observing his poor health, with the enemy all around him, he yelled about it into the night. Ken became aware of this, was rejected in the application of the skill. He realized he shouldn't have trusted and cursed at the last second. Spiders killed the knight. What had happened was unbelievable to Ash. Blood stains were the only thing that showed up on the screen. Startled, the Emperor stood up. He could hear the terrible sound of flesh being torn. Spiders were consuming human flesh. His orders were incorrect. A medallion with a shared photo was lying on the ground. They take another person's valuable life. The soldiers hurried over to the opening. Someone in the wall yelled that Ken had advanced along the defensive line. Not just Ken, but all of us must move forward without even the slightest fear of retreating. Everyone present. The spider's paw was killing the soldiers. Ash believed that his one and only command was killing them. He was solely to blame. The Emperor's eyes narrowed as he realized that killing them wasn't just his fault. The boy was playing this game while seated in front of the computer. When needed, he employed 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. That's how this game was made. On the blue screen, a request to deploy a second squad was made. There were dead soldiers lying behind the ground, the hero confirmed. To obtain an item, finish a side quest, save someone, obtain an accomplishment. He was enjoying the sacrifice of someone who had to die. The boy gave a yawn. He had never questioned a single action he had taken, but now he was aware that his hand was shaking. He gave them an order to halt the significance of everything he had done thus far. The emperor yelled at the monsters to cease. He came to understand that every death was accompanied by excruciating suffering. In front of him, a destroyer spider materialized. He yelled at them to stop. They won't give up. Screaming would never stop them, the Majesty thought, clenching his teeth. The destroyer was pierced by a massive sword. Lucas questioned, how dare he aim at the prince? While using magic to control the sword, he looked up and inquired about His Majesty's well-being. He glanced at the lifeless destroyer. He realized there was only one way to stop them with a single blow. So he grabbed his sword's hilt. He severed the destroyer's head. Blood from a green SP spider splashed to the side. Before they kill them, kill the spiders. The cannon was loaded for the fourth shot. The soldier informed the prince. But Damien was unable to do so. The soldier was interrupted by the emperor, who asked if he could fire. The man replied that he could, despite the fact that blood was streaming from his eyes. A bright blue beam illuminated the cannon shot. The fourth shot. In the sky, a massive blue ball materialized. The spider queen gave a hiss. A blue stream dissolved a number of spiders. The queen screamed loudly. The earth broke apart in flames. But a blow to the head. In the dust, red eyes glowed. In the center of the flames stood the spider queen. She was still alive. The prince and the soldier stood in shock. Everyone in the vicinity of the cannon dropped to their knees. Blisters appeared. The armor on their hands melted, and the shot melted. The soldier claimed that the cannon had reached its limit and would just blow up if they tread it once more. He offered to surrender while seated near the cannon. Is this the end? The emperor wondered. The cannon was in danger of being destroyed due to severe damage. The enemy onslaught is not being stopped by the soldiers. There is a break in the line of defense. Damien let out a painful scream. The gunman was unable to open his eyes. Is this truly the end? Ash put his hand down. Is there truly nothing left to hope for? They definitely caused damage. According to one of the soldiers who saw something in the telescope, the prince turned to face the soldier. The queen's skin had peeled off, he said. He faced the fighter. He stayed loyal to his role despite this circumstance. A green charge was moving toward the end from behind him. He said they would destroy her if they fired once more. Green light and excitement glowed on His Majesty's face. At the top of the tower, there was an explosion. When Lucas noticed this, he yelled at the emperor. He was tumbling from the summit. Everything was ruined. Shards of the tower were flying across the globe. The hope of victory, everything. The emperor had two eyes. He was being addressed by the knight. A bright light blinded his eyes. He managed to concentrate his attention. The knight used his body to shield him from a big piece. The prince, Lucas, spoke to him. He inquired as to whether His Majesty was hurting. He cut him off by saying that he ought to be asking him how he was doing. There was a lot of blood beneath the knight, he noticed. The emperor was asked by the knight if he recalled that incident from 20 years ago. He was unable to recall it. The emperor stood there bewildered, like a player who had assumed another person's body. He didn't remember Ash or him. The knight went on to say that he made a statement when His Majesty designated him as his personal guard. He questioned what he had said. He would become the world's coolest person even if he were to become emperor. As the one who would become his knight, the boy knelt before the other and tried to be the coolest of them all. The boy gazed with wide eyes and an open mouth. And even though it was during his teenage years, the injured Lucas grinned and said that his words had touched his heart so deeply that he still remembered them today. They were both in the ruins. According to the knight, he had faith in His Majesty. He asked, glancing at the knight. Even now, the warrior responded that, more than before, a piece of the tower fell on the knight with assurance in his eyes. He fell because he was unable to support the weight. All that was visible were ruins. The knight was rescued from beneath the debris by the prince. He told him to hold on after giving him a look. He is the primary hero and this world's savior. Lucas was unconscious on the ground. I can't die in such a place, Ash went on. The emperor made the decision to put an end to all of these while glancing to the side. They are located beneath the artillery unit. What was the duration of his unconsciousness? He looks around and sees 2 dead soldiers close to the cannon. As he approaches, he recognizes Damien and all of the gunners. Fortunately, they were not killed, but the cannon was. Why were they all still alive? Ash wondered. The spiders were where? Someone called out to the hero. Lily was standing in the center of the flames. What he saw in the ruins did not convince the emperor. They turned to face one another. This is not the end. In agony, the girl clenched her teeth. Is that true? She asked, glancing at the emperor. Ash's eyes widened. Lily was extending her hand toward him. She told him she wouldn't be around for long after glancing at him. She claimed that although she was currently guarding the entrance, the monsters would soon attack them. The girl said, closing her eyes, that they had to move quickly because they were running out of time. She asked the hero not to let them die needlessly as she turned to face him. The brunette G at his jaw. After giving the gunners a quick glance, he gave them the order to load the final shell. The warrior Shook declared that the cannon's capacity had already been reached. They examined the firearm. He claimed that it would blow up if they fired once more. He turned to the side and warned them that they would perish beneath the spiders. Pause if they did nothing. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, he asked. Ash scowled and advised them to proceed, even if it meant burning alive. The soldier asked how they were supposed to aim after looking up. From here, they were unable to see anything. The queen would be impossible for them to locate. He claimed that they would have to hold the gun in their hands because the gun rack was worn out. The hero reasoned that they would have to chew with their gums if they were toothless. There was no need to aim, he said, looking forward. All Damien had to do was fire. As he gave the order to load the final shell, the warrior stared at him in disbelief. He took a step and realized that, although he was unsure of the precise mechanism of the clairvoyant skill, Damien would always hit the target as long as he fired. He believed that they could simply have faith. The brunette went up to the man. He pivoted. He had to fire one final time, according to his leader. When the commander asked to gather his strength once more, he hardly saw him. What's the point? Damien asked, glancing at him. He claimed that nothing changed regardless of what he did. The hero scowled. He claimed that the monster would perish if he struck it once more. The boy turned to face him and asked, what would change even if he pulled the trigger again and the queen actually died? He said, looking down, that even if he eliminated all of his adversaries, half of his friends would still be dead. The boy grew gloomy. Damien expressed his desire to put an end to everything. This was not the kind of world he wanted to live in. The brunette screamed and scowled. Did he really believe that life would always be terrible, even if he overcame a significant obstacle in his path, and that this world was unfairly cruel? He affirmed. Ash screamed that he was right and grabbed him. He claimed that if this world had a level of difficulty, it would undoubtedly be terrible, with an Iron Man mode that is unsavable. He believed that this was how the world had always been. The pupils of the hero narrowed. He claimed that this place was so incredibly unfair. He perceived a devastating landscape all around them. Would he give up fighting? When asked if he would give up and wait to die, Damien's eyes grew wide. That, in Ash's opinion, was not a good excuse. The man appeared stunned. The hero believed that they ought to battle until they perished. After letting him go, the man declared that he would fight and devise new tactics. The brunette put the sword to his head and told him to cut his throat with it. Immediately after, he brandished his sword and declared that he wanted to give up and die. He discarded the sword and asked Dare if he was brave or a coward. Ash approached and claimed to be his trigger. He advised him to stop thinking about his deceased pals. He was only required as a commander. When Damien learned that he was merely a key and a chess piece, he became determined. All he needed was that. That's all he needed, the hero said, glancing at him. He received a notification indicating that he had unlocked the new ability, Indomitable Commander. His eyes were shining. That was an order, he said. The brunette told him to smash this monster's ugly face while placing his hand on his shoulder. The man was radiant. He concurred. He said he would obey the commander after glancing at him. The last shot was loaded, according to the warrior. They couldn't cool the cannon, he said, glancing at Ash. He said he would hold it after glancing at the cannon. Raising his hand, the artilleryman warned that touching the hot cannon would have dire repercussions. In response, The hero said he would prefer to burn here rather than in hell. He asked the young man if he was ready after giving him a quick glance. He claimed to be unable to see anything when he looked ahead, but Commander assured him that everything was all right. Damien claimed he was unable to feel his hands while holding a stick. He soothed him. He told him it was all right, grinning. Ash grabbed the firearm. He tightened his jaw and raised it. The gunners hurried to assist him. Together, they raised the gun while holding out their hands. There was a massive spider in front of them. Damien yelled as the hero scowled. He said, "Shoot," while glancing off into the distance. The gun was loaded. The release of energy started. The hero turned to face the future. The gun was prepared to shoot. It fired because a massive charge had built up. The brunette requested that she strike. With hope, he looked ahead. At first, he believed that shooting at an unseen enemy was an impossible task. The charge was soaring. The man believed that there appeared to be no possibility of striking. Ignoring the height, he believed the projectile was headed directly toward the Spider Kingdom. Ignoring the distance, the projectile continued to fly. It soared above other monsters. It was nearly there. The hero believed it to be quite true. The monster snarled as though on a predetermined course. The projectile struck her head without any problems as it flew toward the kingdom, which screamed in fear and rage. How he did it was the subject of a message. The man felt as though he had swallowed his tongue and was unsure of how to respond to the viewer's initial message. He was asked if he would stream once more in the message. He recalled his response. Ash then opened his eyes. Eyes believed he was still alive. He flinched in agony. He was advised that getting more rest would be beneficial. He rose from his bed. The man claimed in his letter that Damien used magic to heal him. The redhead claimed that his burns were quite severe without turning around. The healing process would take longer. He slept for 3 days, she said, setting down the pen. Given what he had been through, she said, looking at him, that she believed he would never awaken. He said that she had survived after opening his eyes in disbelief. Lily claimed that she was responsible for the queen's death following the final shot. Without her, the spiders ceased to move. When the girl announced that they had won, he turned to face her. Monsters were being burned while the soldiers cleaned up the battlefield. The redhead claimed that the army handled the remaining spiders in addition to gathering the corpses of our allies. Ash peered out the window. He was severely burned and would need to go to the church. Lily said, raising an eyebrow. When she mentioned that he would have a few scars, the hero glanced at his hands. He asked her how she and her wounds were doing as he looked up at her. The man's eyes opened. She squeezed her hand and claimed that a spider hurt her back as she fled mana. The girl grew gloomy and reported that her lower body was immobile, presumably as a result of nerve damage. The hero didn't say anything. The redhead expressed her gratitude for being alive while placing her hand to her chest. Only 5 of the artillerymen survived, according to her. Ash believed that only 9 people were left after the last battle, which had started with hundreds. He held his head tightly. He questioned whether there had been an alternative. He questioned whether he had overlooked any other strategy. There must have been a way to save at least one more person, he thought to himself. He was not a god, Lily said, placing a hand on him. He had done everything he could, she said, staring into his eyes. The man claimed to have dragged the soldiers there while looking down. He believed that despite the fact that it wasn't him, he still had a duty because he was in this body. The girl claimed that after all these years, nobody could have predicted that monsters would be moving in large numbers. When she advised him not to be too hard on himself, the hero scowled. Lucas bolted into the space. He expressed his happiness that His Highness had awakened while sobbing. He knelt down and inquired about any unusual sensations in his body. He stopped talking. When the commander inquired as to whether he had sustained any serious injuries, the proud blonde got to his feet and declared that being extremely cool was his main objective. He pulled out the lists of the deceased and claimed that many were missing. When the man mentioned that they made an effort to gather as many as possible, Ash turned to face him. Where were the corpses? He inquired. He was now informed that they had arrived at the forward operating base. The hero got to his feet. Everyone in his immediate vicinity objected. He scowled and declared that he would still go even though they had died at his command. The sun was rising. Lucas embraced the emperor. The brunette found it convenient and felt ashamed. Lucas was asked if he wanted to be his favorite horse. In response, he said that his command was his wish. The Emperor approached Damien from behind as he looked up at the knight. The boy pivoted. Ash descended and inquired about the condition of his eyes. He claimed that yesterday, his vision had begun to come back. He claimed to be able to see normally while clutching his glasses. Once more, despite his inability to see, the brunette thought he had heard that he had used magic to heal the injured. The boy chuckled. Ash turned to face him and stated that he was the only reason the plan worked. He promised to give him money and ensure that he would never again set foot on the battlefield. He went on to say that he could do whatever he wanted. He was his trigger, Damien reminded him. The hero gave him a look. The boy expressed his curiosity about these creatures' origins. He expressed his desire to understand why his friend had to pass away. He asked to be permitted to follow the Emperor after meeting his gaze. The knight grinned. Ash agreed, declaring that he would now follow him in remembrance of the deceased. A priest was required. There was a blue fire. The hero gave it a glance. He believed he was aware that there was no better approach or tactic. He believed he had selected a strategy. This is what happened when you followed it. To proceed, he had to accept accountability and bear it. The brunette said, glancing ahead, "Gather all the corpses and move them after the funeral." He recalled that thousands of people died each year. Funerals were more valuable than lives in the world he lived in. He claimed that there was an empty field on the western side of the intersection. They ought to pay their respects and be buried there. He believed that he intended to construct a cemetery there, and he had also constructed a memorial site there in the game. The Emperor turned to face the future. In front of them, there was a fire. He believed that the last day of February would be a day for all the characters he killed when Ash announced that it would be the day of their sacrifice every year. The man made the decision that this would be his atonement without feeling guilty. The fire was blazing. He would never fail like that again, the brunette said with a frown. The knight faced him. They peered forward. The hero recommended going back to Crossroads, their main base. A notification stating that rewards had been received and the location had been cleared appeared. The carriage's wheels sliced through the earth. Once everyone had left the forward operating base, a convoy of carts and carriages crossed the aircraft. For the past 3 days, they had been heading north toward the intersection. Ash's neck had a red flash from the stone. He sighed deeply and grimaced, believing he would soon pass away from boredom. As a coachman, Lucas became alert when the man loudly inquired about their presence. The blonde exclaimed that they only needed to wait a short while, and that they would soon arrive. The brunette threw his elbow on the back of the couch, believing that the knight had always assured him that they would arrive shortly. But this was untrue. He glanced at the blue sign above his head that gave him the option to select his class. Ash made a mental note that he would have to decide soon. He waved his hand, believing that the class in this game was set at level 5 and that he had advanced to level 5 after finishing the tutorial. He asked why he had such a successful stat growth. After glancing at the screen with his stats, which were at their lowest, the most intriguing thing, the man thought as he thoughtfully touched his chin, was that, despite he could select any class in the game if his stats increased. There was one issue with listening to him, though. He discovered a unique class at the end of the list, the Commander, which had undoubtedly not existed prior to imagining the game model. The two were unsure of which category to put it in, the brunette mentally noted. He questioned whether this was the hidden class or something similar. Ash scowled. He thought that the fact that he had recently acquired a new skill might be a sign that he should select the Commander class. He discovered after looking at the statistics that the ability granted. After 10 encounters, all allies were immune to mental debuffs, and it was deemed a useful skill. The boy stared at the screen, sadly believing that this skill was useless at this point, because mental debuffs would not show up for a long time. He also thought it sounded dangerous to select a class about which he knew nothing. This was really tough, the brunette muttered as she peered out the carriage window. His Highness was alerted to the crossroads by a loud voice. Ash became alert. He joyfully exclaimed as he peered out the carriage window. His eyes grew wide with astonishment. The convoy was getting close to a massive gate. Built on the southern outskirts, the crossroads was surrounded by a tall wall. The gates were opened for them by the knights. The purpose of the fortress was to prevent the monsters from continuously emerging from the Black Lake. Inside, the motorcade started to move. Imagining the map, the man mentally noted that this fortress was the most significant in the empire at the time. But over time, the monster invasion subsided. The army was relocated, and mercenaries were brought in to guard the fortress because there was no army left. Ash visualized a warrior's silhouette, mentally noting that these were either inexperienced newcomers or veterans getting ready to retire. Mercenaries didn't care about their nationality or credentials. Imagine entering a city that is covered in blood. The man considered how, in order to keep the wheels turning, the empire only needed human shields to support the front line. He considered how restaurants, hotels, and banks started to appear here since life itself had lost its value. The fortress, which became a city 10 years later, caught the brunette's attention. He examined the defensive towers, reflecting on how, at one point, it was no longer referred to as such. Fortress City was the new name for the fortress. The convoy proceeded down the road. Ash added that there was another name that sounded like a parody of the mercenaries who, like moths, flew to their deaths blinded by money. Suicide Street, the city of tombstones, was its name. With his mouth slightly open, the brunette believed that this was the crossroads, the Majin outline. Observing its surroundings, he realized that although it was difficult to see through the screen, the city was bigger than he had anticipated. Observing the destruction, he observed that it was also considerably more dilapidated. With a neutral expression, Ash gazed out the window, reasoning that he would still need to defend this city. The convoy was observed by the locals. The main carriage was being driven by Lucas. The man peered out the window. He observed in his mind how the air grew heavier. The locals expressed their disgust as they stood there. The brunette looked away from them, picturing himself riding a horse. It made sense, he reasoned, since their recently appointed commander and lord had hardly survived the massacre of his army. Ash grinned evilly, believing that he had anticipated this. People asked if all of the stones in the cart were magical crystals as they examined them. The sun was just barely shining on the red stones. The man realized in his mind that he had intentionally stacked them in the cart so that everyone could see more than 400 kilograms of black spider magic crystals. Imagining the massive black monsters, he reasoned that these crystals were of very high quality and that it was easy to estimate their price because they were high-level monsters. They were so costly, he thought to himself, that he could temporarily forget about money. Ash smiled mischievously, believing that he should be rewarded with something of this kind for crossing the obstacle. He believed that collaboration with the citizens was essential to the story's seamless progression. Observing their apathetic expressions, he felt that they had lost all faith in him. But even he was not so straightforward. The brunette mentally noted that he knew how to gain their trust as she imagined the game models. He pictured numerous gold coins looking off to the side. They should wait a bit, Ash told them in his head. Observing their admiring gazes at the red crystals, he believed that by using the best strategy, he could win their hearts. The city was bathed in sunset. The wheels came to a half-stop. The door was opened by the man. They had arrived, Lucas said, sitting on one knee on the ground. Stepping onto the step, the brunette complimented his subordinate on a job well done. He saw the vast estate of the Lord. His eyes grew wide with astonishment. He pondered whether he would live in this opulent structure. Ash froze with a shocked expression on his face, thinking to himself that this was nothing compared to the house he had previously lived in and that he had never imagined receiving such a dream home. A man loudly called his lord as he bolted from the estate. The man with brown hair rushed to the master and said he was happy to be alive. The brunette recognized him and gave him a startled look. The worried-looking man muttered that he couldn't refer to him as simply my lord and started to apologize. Call him whatever you want, Ash advised. They took hold of his hand and expressed their extreme concern for his lord. After pressing his cheek to his hand and declaring that he was both hot and cold, the man wearing glasses decided that he would remain gray. Imagining the game model, the brunette mentally noted that this obnoxious guy, who smelled like a traitor, was named AR and that he was an NPC who oversaw the city. He mentally noted that he was responsible for all Crossroads administrative duties, including facility construction and system upkeep, and that he would now have to oversee the city alongside him. The estate's door opened, declaring that he had already drawn a bath and made dinner so the Lord could rest for the remainder of the day. Ader gestured to the room. Ash's face froze in shock. He glanced at Lucas and instructed him to make sure that soldiers were getting enough sleep before telling him to do the same for himself. As the blonde started to angrily declare that he should be on guard, the boy waved his hand. The brunette advised him to remain composed and carry out his responsibilities the following day. With a frustrated sigh, the knight accepted the directive. As a servant called him, the lord turned to face him and ascended the stairs. Lucas' room appeared to be on the first floor, he thought with a gentle smile. The bathtub was being rubbed with hot water. 𝗬𝗏 yelled that it would eliminate the intimidation and the stench of blood, pointing to it with his hand. Ash thought with a happy expression that he hadn't had a bath in a long time after the fight. He made a mental note that he was going to get as much rest as possible today, because the trip was exhausting. After removing his jacket, the boy thanked the man with brown hair and advised him to get some rest today as well. He flashed his glasses, grimly grinned, and started to unbutton his shirt. Referring to Ash as 𝗪𝘃𝗃𝗃, he said it was just amazing. The brunette froze as she gazed at the water. After shutting the door, the man with brown hair remarked that he had received training that was unimaginable. The main character angrily turned around. The bespectacled man declared that he was the director of the Empire Defense while grinning wildly. A fist flew into his face a moment later. The man took off sideways. Ash gritted his teeth in rage as he considered the situation. The individual who hurled him here. He turned to face the shaking brown-haired man who was pleading with him to calm down. 𝗬𝗏 screamed that he was so sorry for having to abduct him as he collapsed to his knees. With a confident expression, he said, "This world needs." The brunette was hurling a fist at him. The battered director was sobbing and pleading for pardon. He indicated that he was now prepared to speak with him by raising his hands. He inquired as to whether he was the sender after recalling the message from Mr. A. Ash scowled at the man and questioned whether he was actually the world's director. 𝗬𝗏 said yes to every question. He began rummaging through his pocket. He used a handkerchief to wipe away his tears as he responded. This world has a true ending. When asked why he had entered it, the brunette listened, perplexed, about the loading screen, which was the only conclusion that no one had reached. The creator claimed that despite dropping mines numerous times to get there, he was never able to accomplish his goals. Ash questioned whether you truly chose to enlist someone else's assistance. The man with brown hair then gave a positive response by snapping his fingers. A lot of blue circles started to show up around them. Touching one of them, 𝗬𝗏 claimed to have transformed this world into the game one and shown the players their other world. Earth was one of the servers. The man claimed that others were able to advance well in areas that he was unable to even consider. But with a dejected expression, he observed that nobody could achieve success. Ash asked if he was one of them, giving him a worried look. He also mentioned that he was unaware of the real conclusion. In response, the creator turned to face him and said that while he had not yet reached it, he had accomplished something that no one else had. He was the only person who had finished the game on hell difficulty with Iron Man mode. The brunette mentally noted. He questioned whether that was the only explanation. The man with brown hair sat on the floor beside him and explained that he was only here because he believed he could handle it. The Lord swung his fist again, exclaiming that he had actually been kidnapped. Remembering himself on the front lines, he listed how he had been thrown into an impossible training and into the body of a terrible person. 𝗬𝗏 covered his face with his hands, muttering that these were technical problems and he himself had not expected this. He extended his hand to the guy and asked to be given the opportunity to tell him about the reward he would receive if he could. The creator began to say that if he reached the true ending, he spread his arms out to the sides and said that he would then grant his wish. The brunette raised an eyebrow in confusion and asked again when the brunette's nose began to bleed. He said that in this world he was akin to a deity. When the brunette's nose started to bleed, she asked again, raising an eyebrow in perplexity. He claimed to be similar to a god in this world. He continued, it would not be difficult for him to reward him generously. Picturing the opening box, Ash asked him if he had any requests before bringing him back to Earth. The man gave an affirmative response. The Lord asked to be granted 10 billion. The brunette smirked and asked, adjusting his glasses, why so little? He claimed to be able to give him at least $100 billion. The brunette grimaced in rage, believing he would never be able to get rid of the impression that he was speaking to a con artist. He made a mental note that he wanted the wish to come true. He believed he could ask for anything, recalling his everyday existence. His computer screen displayed a message. He believed that he had one wish that he would do everything in his power to fulfill. Ash wondered if Creator was telling the truth as he looked at him. Then, grinning, 𝗧𝗧𝗽𝗃 questioned whether he was correct to say that he already knew what he wanted. He pointed out that it was far more significant than money. He believed that as he stared at the man with brown hair, he became aware that this self-described deity knew far more about him than he had previously believed. At the hospital room door, the man recalled himself, believing that he knew what he regretted, and that he had been harboring this regret for a very long time. When the Creator said he could fulfill his dream, he averted his gaze. This dream was long gone, Ash retorted. The man with brown hair opened his arms and said he would never be able to turn her down as long as she remained in his heart. Glancing up, the brunette questioned whether he should not be able to reach the real conclusion, and whether he had the strength to do so. Looking back, 𝗧𝗧𝗽𝗃 declared that he was only a human and that his powers were severely restricted in this world. After hearing that this was the reason he needed someone to act on his behalf, the man closed his eyes. Ash wondered what would happen if he suddenly wanted to die while the vast estate was shrouded in darkness. He clutched his head. The man hoped his demise would be simple after saying that. Life is a coin toss where there are no saves and loads, he said, pointing a finger in front of his face. That was delivered by him. He believed he fully grasped this. The protagonist mentally scowled as he passed the game, pointing out that everything was right and that this was how the game was always. He recalled the passing of his character, believing that although she was always concerned with convenience, she was ruthless when it came to death. 𝗧𝗧𝗽𝗃 waved his hand and said he could make arrangements for him to come back right away. Ash asked loudly if he was serious. After adjusting his glasses, the man with brown hair said yes. He stated that generally speaking, in line with the plan, he ought to have inquired about it immediately, but something went wrong. The brunette scowled as a result. When he was instructed to make a decision, the Creator held out his hand and promised to grant him the chance to realize his dream if he assisted him in reaching the real conclusion. He extended his other hand and squinted. He stated that he could either go back to living a routine life without endangering himself. The man listened to the statement that the decision was his own while staring at 𝗧𝗧𝗽𝗃 in front of him. He said nothing, beginning to think that if the situation were different, he would go back right away. However, he is unable to do so due to two factors: visualizing a brilliant star in the heavens. The first, Ash thought to himself, is a chance to realize a dream, and the second, he looked up and thought it might be possible. In front of the computer, the man recalled himself, believing he had already finished this and was familiar with nearly everyone. He asked himself why he hadn't gone through it again and smiled a little. A water drop landed in the bathtub. 𝗧𝗧𝗽𝗃 shouted joyfully while clasping his hands. When Ash agreed, the brunette scowled and said that the Creator should remember his promise and that he was counting on mutual assistance in order to achieve this true ending. The man with brown hair raised his hands and declared that he was his own. The man approached him and inserted a finger into his chest. He gave him the directive to sell every crystal by morning. Once more, the servant inquired. When the brunette asked him angrily what was wrong and pointed out that he ought to know where to dispose of this exchange item, he put his hands in front of him. 𝗧𝗧𝗽𝗃 muttered that it was late and all the stores were closed. But the protagonist towered over him with a somber expression, telling him that he had to finish by morning regardless of whether he sold them at night or at dawn. Introducing the red crystals, the Creator muttered that he would take care of everything while adjusting his glasses. According to Ash, even if you sell them for a mediocre price, you can get a substantial sum for 388 pieces. What would he do with so much money? The bespectacled man inquired. The man said there was a vacancy on the team after giving him a look. He grinned, questioning whether he really had to respond. He stood at the mercenary guild with Lucas, contemplating the gacha. A coin was thrown into the air by the Lord. He grabbed it firmly. He grinned smugly and declared that he would begin with 100 SP. The gold-filled carts were guarded by the knights. By one of them sat a weary 𝗧𝗧𝗽𝗃. Voices could be heard behind the door where the main character and his companion stood. They were happy, Ash said, crossing his arms. He was invited inside by the blonde. He first attracted attention by kicking down the door. They were noticed by everyone in the room. A big bald man asked him angrily, "Who am I? And do you really want to die?" The man asked where his eyes had disappeared while wearing an irate expression. He took the terrified man by the head, introduced himself as his future employer, and then inquired as to whether the man himself wished to die. As the prince and the darkness advanced, after learning that he had outlived all of his people, people started chatting among themselves. Someone on the front lines reported that he had also killed the black spiders. Ash glanced around, wondering if anyone was shining. He made a mental note that new characters could be eliminated in the mercenary guild, and that their potential was obviously determined by their rank. He quickly looked away and asked the same question again. He visualized a man emitting blue light in his mind. The prince was greeted by a female voice while holding a cigar. Noting that His Highness belonged to the Crossroads Continental Mercenary Guild, the elderly woman in a military uniform grinned. However, Brunette became aware of her senior rank. Unbelieving it, he grinned tensely. Ash took a seat beside the woman in a chair. He wanted to know her name. She put her hand on her chest, got to her feet, introduced herself as Jupiter, and expressed her happiness to meet you. The Lord made a mental note that he found it hard to accept that this elderly woman, an 𝗧𝗿𝗃𝗍𝗪𝗃, belonged to the mercenary guild. The prince scowled and remarked that he had never seen a uniform like that. He then inquired as to which nation it belonged to. The woman said, this was the Ever-Black Empire, and for a long time His Highness, as she touched the medals on her chest. Didn't realize it since this model was developed many years ago. With a smile, Ash inquired as to whether it implied that she had previously worked for the Empire. Jupiter responded with a smile, saying that she had served for 30 years, even serving as the captain of the second squad of magicians, and that she now makes her living by hiring. She grabbed a drink. The magician responded that this was completely untrue when the brunette pointed out that she had to be an exemplary soldier even after retiring. Living on a single pension is simply difficult. She asked the man what had brought him here while shaking the glass in her palm. I'm looking for someone useful, the prince responded with a smile. After giving him a quick glance, the woman questioned whether he was looking for bait that would kill him. Lucas scowled at such arrogance. Ash stopped him as he went for the blade, assuring him that everything would be all right. Rumors of the combat on the front lines had already gone viral. Jupiter added, biting her cigar. The mercenary remarked that it seems he had paid a heavy price for his ineptitude as the child collapsed in his recollections. She stated that even though they were useless as smoke wafted around the space, they weren't fools who would dig their own graves. They were paid to fight, as she stated that none of them wanted to put their lives in the hands of an inexperienced new commander. The others stood behind her. The prince replied he understood, grinning. He rose from his seat. He turned to face the mercenaries and inquired as to whether their ultimate goal was to sell their life. The crowd paid close attention to his outbursts and wondered if they were here because there was no other way to earn money. He questioned whether they were now scared to pursue their goals. The brunette noted as he slapped his hand down on the table that they said that they weren't fools excavating their own graves. When the main character mentioned that it sounded at least unusual to him, Jupiter scowled. The mercenary was stunned, he said, but not a career was particularly noteworthy. He grinned a little and questioned whether this was also digging a tomb. When he asked if it was true that she was later fired for surreptitiously embezzling military monies, imagining shadowy silhouettes among the warehouse, he mentally observed that she must never have believed he knew about her background. The Lord pointed out that it went from being corrupt to smuggling commodities. She still proudly dons a military uniform despite his outcry that they failed to catch her and that she was fired in shame. When the prince asked, grinning, whether she was not ashamed, the woman gave him a disgruntled expression. He imagined the embodiment of corruption, a corrupt soldier who was dishonorably dismissed and rotten to the core. While visualizing a burning flag, he started to imagine a fighter with remarkable skills, a heroine who resembled a pirate rather than a warrior. As he imagined a woman brandishing lightning bolts, it was all about Jupiter, the light mage, Ash thought to himself. The mercenary exhaled smoke and declared that she was still somewhat proud to be an Empire soldier, despite the fact that her career ended so poorly. She told the brunette to keep an eye on himself after giving him a quick glance. The woman's eyes clouded, and the Lord asked her how much she would sell her a 𝗵𝗺 pride. The prince asked how much it would cost to turn her into a hunting dog while glaring at her. The woman grinned and said, "At least 100,000 because, despite her appearance, she was quite expensive." When the man interrupted and made a 200,000 offer, her cigar fell. When he stated that he wished to double the bid, Jupiter froze with a bewildered expression. This was a hefty price for a mercenary, Ash thought to himself. But he was both the lord of the city and the prince of the empire. He recalled the 𝗧𝗵𝗲𝗃𝗃𝗃 and realized that he had just sold all 400 of the magic gems. The man smirked as he towered over Jupiter, believing that he would pay anything to purchase a senior rank. He declared that he was purchasing their fear of dying as he displayed the card. He promised to pay them twice the initial bid right away. With a sly smile, Ash said that cowards who didn't want to sell their lives could return home to their mother. But if they were actual mercenaries seeking large sums of money, they could. He concluded by telling the throng of people to come to the vacant field west of the intersection tonight. The prince observed the big white structure and made a mental note that the next he had to go to the church. At the statue, the girl was tending to the Lord. She said that everything was ready, but there would still be a tiny scar after glancing at the red area on his neck. The brunette thanked 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃, the best healer and the secret hero of the 𝗪𝗃𝗃𝗃, with a charming smile. Ash adjusted his collar, believing that if he met certain requirements, he could later recruit her. But that was not the reason he was here today. He reminded them of his earlier question while setting down the coin bag. The girl observed the priest, noting that she had brought everyone who was currently available. Damien gave the Lord a nod, and he made a mental note of how well he had adjusted. While the sun was shining over the church, the boy grinned and proposed that they leave immediately. They had a lot of work to do today, he said. The prince was standing on the podium west of the crossroads that night. Came from the base of translation. Near the boy's grave was a medallion with a picture on it. Ash's lips were pursed in annoyance. Each coffin had the imperial flag draped over it, and the soldiers were arranged in a proper line. The choir of the church sang. In a city where dying was so cheap and common, this kind of respectable funeral was uncommon. A shaky girl sat on a relative's grave. Financial compensation had been given to each deceased person's family. Startled by the quantity, people started whispering, and the word got out among the town's residents. Rumors always spread fast, the prince thought to himself. He looked forward with pride, believing that this was a legitimate performance and that he would not embellish anything. Observing the big red flag, he felt that their battle on the front lines ought to be regarded as a heroic endeavor for the benefit of humanity. The boy moved forward one step. As he stood beneath the flag, he introduced himself as Ash von Hyder, the third prince and recently appointed lord. Black people were staring down at him and making disparaging remarks. The brunette opened his mouth and immediately said what he wanted to say. He claimed that everyone would constantly perish on the front lines. While glancing at his subjects, among the throng, he noticed Jupiter frowning. The Lord made a mental note of her arrival. He parted his lips once more. The man said it again. He remarked, glancing at the throng of local spectators, that the choir would play and new graves would appear in the cemetery each week. People repeatedly paid close attention to statements that their death was far more valuable than their survival. Ash considered how nearly half of the money he made from selling the crystals had gone toward paying for the funeral expenses and compensation. At his friend's grave, Damien was in prayer. Death shouldn't be cheap, the brunette thought to himself. Raising his head, he declared that he would attempt to save each and every one of them. In the throng, Lily sat. The knights listened to the Lord's assurance that he would stop at nothing to keep them alive and working on the front lines, and the prince warned them not to pass away so quickly, as Ash instructed them to live and extract as much money as they could from him. Jupiter took a drag. Following the request, the guns were raised to compel him to pay for their pricey funeral. Numerous shots were fired. The man wondered how the town's residents would react after mentally noting that he had said everything he wanted. He started making a list of his options as he was leaving the podium and decided he didn't care what they thought of him. The Lord considered how he would demonstrate to them that he was more deserving of standing here than anyone else. Through his outcomes, as his cloak fluttered in the wind, it was time to clear the new location, he said, grinning as he unloaded his fists. The first location was scheduled to begin in 3 days and 1 hour. 2 silhouettes were seen standing in the estate's backyard the evening following the funeral. On the ground was a heap of stones. The player was prompted by the system to activate the teleportation gate. The Lord indicated his agreement by touching the blue screen. The stones started to lift into the sky. They started to form 2 columns. A blue light emerged as the circle closed. Lucas and Ash were standing close to the portal. With a look of surprise, the blonde inquired as to what it was. According to the prince, it was a gate leading to a dungeon beneath the lake. The knight inquired as to his meaning. The brunette answered in the affirmative and stepped forward. This passage would lead them straight to the enemy base, he said, gesturing to the portal. 2 kinds of dungeons are highly valued in Empire defense. These were either dungeon clearing or tower defense. Even the game's cover had this written on it. The player can explore the dungeon beneath the lake and discover the origins of monsters in between passing locations when they are not attacking monsters. However, locations with monsters attacking the crossroads will stop at tower defense. The man recalled the game moment and mentally noted that clearing the dungeon is the open world, which is a crucial game mechanic. Ash glanced at the portal, assuming that it could be activated prior to passing through a single location. He believed that although this game is extremely challenging, it is not very logical. The prince recalled his first battle and mentally noted that although he had suffered greatly during the training, he was now off to a fairly good start. In addition to having a lot of money, he considered Jupiter and Damien to be a cheat character and an AoE damager. The passage seems like a manageable task, and the brunette smiled a little. The boy stood in front of his knight, mentally noting that he had told Lucas the rules and that they were going to scout the enemy base before moving on to the next location. The blonde declared that he understood everything while slamming his fist into his palm. He declared that he was prepared, placing his hands on his hips. Ash winced in bewilderment, questioning whether that was all. Lucas gave him a startled look, and the boy reasoned that he probably had the most questions. Recalling their exchange on the front lines, the prince considered how, despite being in this city for the first time, he, whom the knight had served his entire life, had abruptly changed. He also knew the layout of the city and the location of the dungeon. He believed that this was sufficient to raise suspicions. But Lucas obeyed his commands in silence. The brunette regarded this with suspicion, finding it odd in some way. The Lord summoned his subject while the stars shone in the sky. When Ash asked if the boy wanted to ask him a question, the boy became excited. The blonde scowled. Sweat trickled down the tense face of the protagonist. Lucas put his hand on the knight's chest as he spoke, stating that he had no questions and was just carrying out his orders. In the sky, a full moon emerged. He was his sword and shield, the knight declared. Glancing down, he saw that he was carrying out his orders to kill and protect. The brunette gave him a startled look. He didn't think he didn't have any questions. The prince mentally noted that Lucas had stated that he trusted him and that his loyalty appeared to outweigh his doubts when the blonde bowed his head. His shoulders shook. He came to the conclusion that he ought to be rewarded. A short while later, the Lord turned to face the blue portal and asked his comrade if he was prepared to accompany him to hell. With a menacing expression, the knight declared that he would be happy to accompany him directly to the underworld. Ash grinned. On the screen, he chose the lake location. They both went through the portal. The teleport stones fell apart. The teleportation started loading, and a screen appeared with advice on how to use equipment to strengthen characters. Since it was too late to act like a compassionate game, the man screamed angrily and demanded that pop-ups with tips be stopped. Through the portal, the Lord emerged. They stood by the lake together. The brunette stated that they were present while averting her gaze. Observing the water, he made a mental note that monsters originated in the Black Lake. In the pitch-black sky, the moon shone. He pondered how this dungeon on the world's southernmost point was hell, giving him nightmares. 2 silhouettes stood in the distance. Lucas yelled at the prince to look there, and the prince became alert. The lake's water started to boil. The passage turned as the water split to the sides. Hands started to emerge from beneath the earth. It was shining armor. A knightly army was emerging. Horror warped the Lord's face. He was taken aback by Living Armor's appearance as he observed the warriors. He asked, his teeth clenched, "Why them?" The man believed that it didn't matter who he met in the first place. He speculated that it might be mermaids, goblins, or wyverns. Picturing the slender silhouettes, the prince believed that many low-level monsters were present. He pondered why he had the only living armor he wanted to stay away from. As he looked at the pile, cursing his misfortune, the brunette grabbed his face. "These are the monsters," Lucas said, reaching for his sword. "This time, they'll have to finish." Ash was perplexed by the blue screen that materialized, updating data about the adversaries. It was observed that the location would be attacked by 1052 living armors at level 5. The blonde turned away and walked over to the man. He inquired about his well-being, pointing out that he had become noticeably paler. The Lord scowled in disapproval. He called Lucas, his face perspiring. He seemed to have said this in the tutorial, and the brunette mentally noted that he didn't want to say it again. However, they were in danger. There were 741 instances of living armor approaching the opponents. That is the number of times the main character has played the game since the start. Living armor, a ghost that hides beneath the armor, is one of the reasons he recalls being so exhausted while seated at the computer. Axes and swords are crossed out because they are immune to physical assault. As the second half of the game approaches, it gets easier to fight them thanks to the arrival of artifacts and other equipment. Without them, things are completely different. He bemoans the fact that no one else is clenching his jaws because the main character in living armor is 3. He believes that the game is being purposefully tampered with and that he is being ridiculed. Many more living armor are crawling out of the rift 3 days. And until the opening of the first location, Ash asks Lucas that it's time for them to leave. Whoever agrees to refer to him as Your Highness is forced to take all necessary precautions to keep themselves safe. Monsters emerge from the portal as they vanish into it. When 𝗏𝗏 is called, the doors abruptly open. Within the walls of this spacious mansion, Ash calls 𝗏𝗏 to himself as he celebrates his lord's return. The dark-haired man inquired about the condition of the city's armed forces as he strolled down the hallway. He asks in shock why there are so few of them, since he made 100 PLLs in a row and only received 500. After receiving 526, people who could stand on the front lines and suddenly freezing. As the assistant reported on the soldiers' training, the protagonist became enraged and curled his lips at Ash. "How many more can they hire?" the guy asks. However, he is informed that every mercenary in the city has already been hired. They stopped because of this information when they saw a book cabinet in the hallway. He also inquires as to whether they can hire anyone else. But it turns out that this city does not have any. Scowling, the man requests that word be sent to other cities as well, promising to double the rate. Knowing what is expected of him, 𝗏𝗏 records everything in a notebook. He remembers the Imperial Palace and advises passing this along there as well, saying that reinforcements are required because the monsters have started to awaken. The assistant jots down everything in a hurry. He looks up at the master and asks if he is certain. He remembers that if he doesn't do this right away, a sign will appear in the game alerting him to the impending catastrophe. He's wondering what he can do. He needs to grab his head in order to survive. He hears a confirmation and instructs the 𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃 to keep in touch with them. In reaction, Ash turns around and requests that all of the city's carpenters, masons, blacksmiths, and alchemists come together to serve their interests. The blonde man, who is shocked, explains that the manufacture of magic stones should be stopped. Ash yells that the city can be reduced to dust as he becomes enraged and approaches. Therefore, they must be called here immediately and should not be concerned about stones. 𝗏𝗏 in fear runs to immediately gather everyone. The door is slammed shut. Tiredly approaching the fireplace, the guy clutches his head. After all, the current level of the game is a complete disaster. Opening the system window, he remembers how he could not decide before. But now there is no time to wait any longer. Thoughtfully peering into the system window, he decides to introduce more variables into the game. Due to its complexity, the system window offers him to accept the Rookie Commander class. And so he decided to take a risk. A bright blue light lit up the room when he decided to confirm this class. Afterwards, he was congratulated on receiving this title. Ash is upset about this and refers to it as clown effects. He places his hand on his chest as a sharp pain suddenly pierces his heart. He's breathing heavily and doesn't know what happened or what this feeling is. The system window displayed a -50% growth deficit and turned red. Startled, he looks up and asks aloud what he just heard. Once more, the window displays a -50% DN item ownership. The main character froze. His scream about how awful this is and how they are just making fun of him can be heard throughout the mansion as he looks out the window. The man yells, "Why was I given so many debuffs?" As he grabs the system window with his hands. He takes the poker and swears to kill 𝗧𝗪𝗲𝗃𝗃 out of rage. Notifications about getting an attack, a totem skill, a super buffer, a main order, and access to team synergy started to show up all of a sudden. Ash froze while holding the poker, staring at the pop-up windows and wondering what they were. The fireplace was the only source of light in the space. The man discovers that he can buff all of his soldiers after taking a look at everything that appeared. He was debuffed because he can now increase each soldier's attack and defense level simply by standing on the battlefield. Ash scowls as he carefully reads. He was very impressed by this. He discovers that this is a benefit of the commander class after reading about team synergy, and each team member will receive a different bonus based on their combination. This is an example of how team classes are connected. The man with dark hair grinned, recalling his days as a gamer and celebrating this class's ideality for him. He lifts the poker above his head. Ash frowns and asks EXP to explain what happened when it reappears in the mansion the following day. Nervous, he lowers his head and says that nobody followed the master's instructions. 𝗧𝗪𝗽𝗃𝗃 cheerfully remarks that he was only able to bring the union leaders, as four tied men sit in the center of the room, and Ash furiously accuses him of kidnapping them while he adjusts his glasses. One of the men gets angry right away and starts discussing the lawlessness in the middle of the day. It was the blacksmith's leader. He is backed by the leaders of the carpenters and masons, who bemoan the blonde's ability to simply take and bring them here. Who will be in charge of production, after all? The alchemist's leader opens his mouth in shock, pointing out that even though the main character is a very noble man, everything has its proper place and time. The man fears that he should apologize because everyone is now furious with him, to the point where his veins are bursting from screaming. He sits at the table, furious, and asks if they want to die. His face contorts further, and more as he indicates where they are and who they are shouting at. His hand squeezes the table's edge so tightly that cracks form as he discusses his status as a prince and lord, telling them to stop everything they are doing if he calls. His men were staring into his terrifying eyes. When Ash inquires as to why they offended him, it becomes clear that they genuinely wish to end their lives. The union leaders instantly apologize to the prince in a pitiful manner. The man is struck by how pleasant it is to be Ash in these situations. The negotiations proceeded swiftly after that. Facing their lord, the men let out confused cries, inquiring as to how serious this offer is. The brunette, who is already at ease, affirms and offers magic stones for this task for 20%, less than their market value. For the union leaders, this is a very lucrative opportunity to obtain magic stones. Thus, the topic of establishing trade relations comes up with joy. Ash goes on to discuss the terms of the agreement, which include the requirement that military equipment be produced as soon as the order is received, and that the cost will always be reasonable. The main character asks whether this is a good deal while bending over the table and locking his hands. The men considered this offer because he was able to convince them to do so by using power and money. He wonders if this makes him a materialist in chorus, since he has a lot of money but is currently limited to negotiations. The men yelled that they agreed with this and asked when they should begin to consider it further. Ash became aware of his other options. His assistant was pleased that everything was proceeding as planned, and he grinned at this realization. Money is, after all, the most dependable thing in the world. According to the system window, the first location would open in 2 days and 13 hours. The axe was dragged across the ground by the spirit. The man thought Lucas had already told them everything. There were 1,000 living armor, their faces glowing a brilliant blue. The gray castle walls were illuminated by the light. They were heading toward the city where they were supposed to arrive in 2 days or so. The emperor crossed his arms as he stood. He believed that the expressions on the faces of those around him indicated that they were done. He was asked by the knight what they ought to do. Everything in their power, he replied. He told them to pay close attention to him while crossing his fingers. Above the palace, the sky was blue. The military commander, 𝗬𝗃𝗍𝗃, pledged to give it his all and put his fist to his heart. Ash was seated at the table. Behind him stood 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. He assured him that mistakes would be made by the soldiers. He had to take the lead. In response, the knight said he would follow his instructions. "Your Highness," Lily said, coughing into her fist. She observed this while seated in a wheelchair. The emperor turned to face her and apologized, saying that they needed her more than ever at that moment. Grinning, he reassured her that she shouldn't be concerned because she wouldn't be on the front lines. She initially wanted to know what she would do. In charge of the water artifact, Lily realized what she was going to do and put her hand to her chin. His Majesty believed that he was unable to fire her. As a civil servant, she would have to work while smoking a cigar for the rest of her life. Jupiter had a query regarding the pay. She held a smoldering cigar in front of the emperor. Could she be promoted if he produced results? The emperor believed her to be an elderly woman who was obsessed with money. One of her 3 passive talents, according to the blue screen, was gold fever, a trait that made her obsessed with money, particularly gold. Bright sunlight streamed through the window, just like in the game 𝗧𝗱𝗹𝗲. He informed her, of course, her pay may rise based on her performance and efforts. Then he should consider where he would get enough money to pay her salary next year. She said with a smile. Jupiter, the captain of the special squad, was holding a cigar while wearing a uniform adorned with medals. No other mercenary would put in as much effort for money, she claimed. Patter gave a crossbow to Damien. His Majesty requested to accept it. He made it just for him. He was taken aback. There was information on the blue screen indicating that it was a typical crossbow of the durability, 30 out of 30, no bonuses, 10 to 15. He pledged to take care of everything. Long-range shooter. Damien responded, if this is an order from His Majesty, then everything will be fine with him. Observing his joy with the crossbow, he felt that his posture conveyed uncertainty. But based on how he handled the gun, he seemed confident. The emperor asked him where his glasses were while glancing at him. He was perplexed. He added to the inquiry about whether he currently wears them. He scratched his head and said, "My eyes see perfectly." He claimed that wearing them made his vision worse. He said, grinning, that he would no longer wear them since he now needed his eyes. Ash gave the group a playful smile. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 said he was relieved by this. He was concerned that someone else with glasses might be present. The joke did not sit well with the emperor. He asked him to stand quietly after slamming the table. Workers were fixing the southern wall of the crossroads after talking about the plan. The emperor was greeted by the worker. The foreman was taken aback by his arrival. The emperor inquired about the condition of the wall. "It's bad," he replied. He scowled, realizing that the restoration had been neglected for a long time. The emperor turned to 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 and yelled that he was unfamiliar with the fort and that fixing the walls was the first step toward building stronger foundations. How could he permit this? He was perplexed and simply stated that there was no money. In the semi-darkness stood the former city lord. He went on to say that the previous city lord had slashed the budget, and that fewer monsters meant fewer stones were acquired. Grabbing his head, the emperor questioned, wasn't the main purpose of this fort's construction to keep monsters out? He reasoned that a decline in revenue had diminished the function of the fort. How inconsistent. He waved his hand and ordered that the wall be restored and reinforced so that it would appear excessive, regardless of the amount of money or materials used. I understand. The emperor waved his hand as he departed while the laborers raised their hands to their heads. He advised them to get started right away since the monsters wouldn't be playing around after they verified the order. In front of His Majesty, a work group had assembled close to the workshop's walls. The prepared would be positioned beside the tool-filled workbench. He inquired as to whether they were aware that they needed to arrive within the next 2 weeks. Walls, he said, crossing his arms over his chest. His Majesty gestured at the height with his hand as the worker stood there in confusion. He claimed that the walls were so high that they completely blocked the path. The employee expressed regret and pointed out that the pitiful wooden walls would be easily breached by the monsters. The employee paid attention to what His Highness had to say. He claimed that in order to contain the enemy, he didn't require any extremely powerful ones. The employee asked, grinning once more. In response, the emperor said to simply follow his instructions. All he needed were walls made of wood. Incredibly high, he said, raising his hands. He then raised his hands to the sky while spreading his arms wide to the sides. Staying in the same position in front of a group of workers, he yelled walls. Okay, the light illuminated the upper floors of the workshop, he inquired. He concluded his explanation by stating that he would only comment on getting to work. Lucas thus kept an eye on his soldiers for the next 2 days. Damien worked on his crossbow shooting skills. Jupiter was curled up beneath a tree. Ash was pointing at something because he was upset with 𝗬𝗏, the alchemist, and Lily were chatting amicably. They were preparing what needed to be done. The red flag flapped in the air. In an instant, time passed by. Banners and flags were displayed on the southern wall of the crossroads. A message stating that the start time at location 1 was in 30 minutes appeared on the blue screen. A telescope view of the forest. The adversary is emerging from the woodland. Lowering the telescope, he yelled that he heard a drum beat. One by one, they're getting closer. Standing was the living armor. They immediately started running. They were becoming more and more numerous. They were getting closer to the fort's walls. The signal brazier caught fire. From the tower came a cry that there was nothing to be afraid of. The emperor observed everything from the top of the tower, shouting that the enemy was nothing more than a bunch of losers. He addressed everyone. The ghosts appeared frightening. He was lying, he told himself. The worst monsters you will encounter in the first part of the game are called living armor. Every word was heard by the soldiers. They are the most powerful army in the southern region of the empire, he informed them. He believed he was lying once more. Actually, it's just a desperate group of amateurs and pensioners who work as mercenaries. Out of 100 walls, Cannon stood out. He went on to say that the equipment was in great shape and that water magic was ready. And once more, 𝗚𝗺 would never be completely prepared, regardless of the amount of money invested. The emperor told the army that they would be easily stopped. There was nothing to be concerned about. He yelled at the top of his lungs in an attempt to persuade them otherwise. There were 2 soldiers standing close to the cannon. The emperor gave the order to do as he said. Ash assured everyone that they would raise the banners as they fluttered in the background, their glasses in honor of victory. On the next night, one concerned person is sufficient on this field. Over the battlefield, a powerful storm started to build. With a smile, the emperor said he would let Jupiter handle it. The sky flashed with lightning. At this point, she alone was responsible for half of their power. She gave the recruits the order to leave while she and her special squad were in the forest. She paid a lot of money for the light mage, who launched an offensive. Rose, get away from the sound of hooves. The army of living armor was the target of every monster and rider. There was a single shared objective. Jupiter inhaled deeply from her cigar. The armor gave off a blue glow. Their intention was to murder the populace. They crossed paths while traveling. The riders avoided the monsters and will attempt to approach the humans as closely as they can if there are no barriers. Put another way, the monster's legs started to fall into the hole rather sharply. The direction in which they will travel is clear. Thus, the traps function flawlessly. In front of the monster army, a massive chasm appeared. They didn't have enough time to make them sufficiently deep. The emperor scowled and gave Jupiter an order, but this is not a bad thing. Amidst the dark clouds, a golden glow emerged. She said, well, a bright discharge appeared, as golden lightning surrounded her. She asked to be allowed to earn some money while grinning. Several golden lightning bolts struck the monsters in the pit. Lightning Zone, Skill 1. The lightning had frozen the monsters. The pit emitted smoke. Relying on their weapons, they got back to their feet. The armor emitted a blue glow. Once more, she yelled at them. What were they gazing at? Cursed and insisted that they honor their elders. The ground was hit by another discharge. The armor developed a golden pattern. The emperor recognized Jupiter's mark in this pattern, but he did not believe what he saw. Her cigar started to glow blue. Her hand and I started to glow blue. Dinner was fried armor, she said. Today, charges of blue lightning materialized all around her. She yelled at the monsters to avoid choking. Lightning erupted from the sky and struck them repeatedly. On the wall, the soldiers celebrated. Ash was grinning as he observed the events. He reasoned that the second skill eliminates off-mark targets, while the first skill marks enemies that have taken damage. On the blue screen, a counter of the defeated emerged. From the tower, the number was increasing. As he observed the events, the Emperor was impressed by Jupiter. The armor was still burning out even though smoke was coming from the pit. Another monster's foot crushed it. There were 1,000 adversaries. The attack was only a minor dent, as some people kept falling into the pit and others managed to climb out of it. The Emperor scowled and yelled at her to back off. She gave the order for the others to advance while turning her horse. The riders bolted from the creatures. They were attempting to overtake them. In order to prevent the recruits from turning around and continuing to watch them, she turned her head and spoke to them. Ash turned to the soldiers and observed that everything was proceeding as planned. He gave them the order to prepare and follow his instructions. One of the riders was on the verge of being caught by the monsters. The Emperor felt that there was not much left, and his face tightened. She gave them the order to proceed to the gate. The rider attested to the fact that they ran by the tall wooden fences. The creatures chased after them. She had done a fantastic job, the Emperor said, grinning and clenching his fist. Sunlight flashed between the fences in an array. The ghosts focused on them. The arrangement of the fences created a corridor that led to the gate. Greetings, you appear to be unfamiliar with the world of walls. Now it was their turn, Ash thought, crossing his arms over his chest. The ghosts were standing close to the walls. Not knowing what to do, he pondered whether they would circumvent them or shatter them. Jupiter was observing the events as well. He considered. It was clear why he was asking all these questions. Once more, the monsters became aware of the riders and moved in their direction. The target is visible to me. I approach it correctly. The creatures started to swarm the cramped passageways. He swore at them, pointing out that the walls would be easily destroyed if they totally blocked the path. He raised his hand, but now they had to cram into a tiny area. He gave the order to get ready to shoot. The ghosts were unable to advance. They are becoming fewer in number. They are becoming less mobile. The soldiers had been waiting for this for a long time. The Emperor said, taking a half step back. He gave the order to open fire rather than save ammunition while extending his hand in front of him. Volleys of cannons erupted, and then more red-hot cannonballs flew at the adversaries' heads. A bright yellow light shone on the armor. They were torn apart by the cannonballs' impacts. The fundamentals of defensive game strategies are as follows. The group of adversaries was destroyed by another volley. At various locations within the army of living armor crowd control, explosions took place. There were explosions between the death zone's wooden fences. Aimed at the adversary, the Emperor gave the order for fire to continue shooting. With his crossbow in hand, Damien stood beside him. The monsters couldn't even get past this point, he claimed. Some more adversaries were destroyed by another volley. He went on. Will it not be enough to frown if this continues? The Emperor replied, No, not all yet. The creature hid behind a shield. Under the protection of their shields, they all mounted defense. Despite the explosions, they persisted in their offensive. The Emperor grinned and remarked that it would never be so simple to end in curses. The army of monsters, realizing how powerful they were, hid from the explosions behind shields. The Emperor, grinning, cursed at them and said that it would not end so easily. But he had anticipated this and had prepared himself by turning his head. He turned to face Lily and gave the order to start frowning. After responding that she was paying attention, she gave the order to turn on the gravity field artifact. A ring appeared above a purple sphere. The sphere was now encircled by 3 rings after another ring emerged. The artifact was activating, according to the assistants. A purple field encircled a group of monsters. They experienced its influence on themselves. When the Emperor saw that they were moving more slowly, he yelled. He looked over at Lucas. He turned his head, affirmed His Majesty's decree, and ordered the ballista to prepare. The ballista was cocked by the soldiers. On the wall, a number of ballistas were prepared to fire. With his sword raised above his head, he gave the order for them to swing forward and aim at the soul's cores. He ordered the ballista to be fired. The adversaries were targeted by arrows. The soldiers attested to it. A monster with a shield was struck by an arrow on the fly. From the volleys, a number of monsters fell. One was struck squarely in the helmet, causing pain to the spirit. The enemies were struck by the arrows as they passed through the slowing field. The Emperor considered using crossfire to increase the damage, and using an artifact and ballistas to kill them. Great. Everything is proceeding as planned. There were footsteps coming from behind. The monsters were circling the walls, according to a soldier. The emperor inquired once more. The monsters began to move around the wooden walls after ceasing to congregate. He clenched his jaw, thinking that this might occur. However, more people than he anticipated gave it some thought. There were horsemen standing close to the walls. Looking out from behind the wall, the Majesty turned to face Jupiter. Living armor was coming from her right side, he said. She should use hit-and-run strategies to get them to leave. As he spoke, she lighted a cigarette in response, encouraging her horse. The others were told to follow her. Monsters were sprinting in their direction and launching an assault. She recommended that they give her a try. Observing from the tower, he saw that she was effectively blocking that side. She now had to deal with the opposing armor. It was his turn, he said, turning to face Damien. The monsters kept circling the walls. He was given the order by LG to shoot the attackers coming from the left. He affirmed. He activated the skill by placing his hand on his chest. His crossbow was aimed. He fired the shot. He made a strong shot. The monster's head was the target of the arrow. His helmet was pierced by it. The ghost took off from the armor. They dispersed across the floor. Behind him, the soldiers were stunned. He was happy that he had struck. The emperor grinned as he considered his ability to see 1,000 miles away. With that, on the battlefield, the ballista arrows flew the kill box in the center of a slowing dome. Jupiter focused blue and gold charges at the same time. She was to the right. Damien got ready for another shot. He was to the left. The blue panel was keeping track of how many opponents had been vanquished. They were actually getting close to 500. Ash raised his palm to his chin, thinking that if things continue this way, there shouldn't be any problems until the boss shows up. It was good to see that the planning had been successful. He had no idea what was going on. The monster that had fallen started to glow. From a few others, blue lights shot out. The emperor swore, unaware of what it was, the lights overhead. A BL storm started to form in his thoughts. He believed that the game had nothing comparable. It seemed like 500 monsters had been vanquished. The blue lights started to take shape. They now resembled a face grinning menacingly. The emperor clenched his jaw. The blue screen displayed details about 2 units. The first was a level 26. Phantom Knight worth 1 piece. The second was a level 5 attacking. Living armor worth 5502. He became aware that the commander of the living armor army was standing in front of him. An enemy with a brilliant blue glow stood in front of the wall. A ghost knight. He was the one who gave the legion strength. The knight had a sword and armor. Even though the legion is powerful on its own, they only managed to defeat half of the boss that was waiting for you. He couldn't figure out why it showed up so quickly. The knight did not resist as he stood in front of the fort wall. He simply stood and observed everyone. He didn't use a DEA to launch an assault. He did nothing but hover in midair. But this isn't only a game. This is the truth. The troops' expressions were horrified. They had no idea what it was. The soldiers panicked at the sight of a monster in the skies. The emperor swore, and his face tightened. This was the distinction between the battle against monsters and the one that humans were accustomed to. A spectral night loomed over the fort's walls. The second arouses an innate apprehension about the manifestation of the paranormal. Ash saw that the men were immobile. The soldiers were terrified when the boss monster appeared, as if the remnants of the front line were brought to their knees. Furthermore, it wasn't just the individuals who were afraid. The horse was terrified. Jupiter stiffened. The horse sprang up and threw her to the ground, not realizing what was going on. The adjacent creatures saw this. She made an effort to regain consciousness. The emperor was terrified as he watched. The beast charged ahead. She was unconscious. The armor came over to murder the man in front of them. Someone took off running. The command to assemble was given by someone. Around Jupiter, more mercenaries assembled. One of them claimed that they had a duty to keep her safe. Ash's eyes widened as he observed what was happening. She was the original location's most important component. Her group was in jeopardy. Lucas looked on him to help the squad with the artillery and O's. He turned to face him and responded that the enemies that infiltrate the walls will never increase if the kill box vanishes. Spirit was asked to ride over the warriors by the night. The appearance of the boss caused them to panic. The enemy mob had fewer explosives. The ballistas and cannons ceased to fire. The defense, which was already weak, got weaker. In an instant, the emperor gestured to concentrate on repairing the kill box against the backdrop of the towering boss. The knight said that he understood the instruction, pointing out that every soldier had gone insane. He glanced back at the battlefield, wishing the mercenary to persevere and mentally pleading with her for forgiveness. She realized what was going on. She grasped her head with her hand since she didn't know where she was. She saw blood as she looked at it. She considered what was going on with her. She couldn't hear that. Then she noticed that one of the mercenaries was speaking to her and asked whether she could hear him. He informed her that they had to go. She turned to see other mercenaries standing up and clutching the wound on her head as they battled to defend her. She said that she didn't have time to lie on the ground because of their dire circumstances. The mercenary who was staring at her told her that they simply needed to wait till the rescue team arrived. A monster materialized out of nowhere and swung to attack. The mercenary saw it. He used his mace to launch a counterattack. The monster got to its feet. Its helmet was dented after the impact. The mercenary yelled, perplexed as to why it remained upright. Once he struck it, Jupiter noticed something. He had no time to turn around as the mage yelled at him. His chest was penetrated by a spear. His eyes showed signs of suffering. The warrior was certain he had slain everyone in the area. Crawling behind him, the legless armor attacked. Two more materialized in front of him, raising their swords to deliver strikes. He cried out for assistance. Jupiter became enraged and vowed to roast the beasts. To use the ability, she held up her hand. She didn't succeed. She cursed that she was unable to control the power as she examined her palm. Another mercenary was taken by the hands by the monsters, who then struck her with multiple lethal blows. Another mercenary had run out of energy. The recruit left the battlefield after dropping his shield. The armor made a swing while holding a spear. He hurled the spear. It struck the one who was running straight for him, piercing him on the fly. She turned to face the fallen. A little line of defense made up of a few individuals was annihilated. Jupiter suddenly found himself standing by himself in front of a horde of monsters. In front of her, she could smell the stench of rusty armor, blooming water, and living armor. The smell of drowned people was coming, and the armor was getting closer, saying that they ought to have remained in the lake's bottom. She began to cast a charm. She yelled, her face tightening. Why couldn't they just let the old lady make easy money? She used blue lightning to strike the monsters in front of her while waving her hand. They collapsed to the ground lifeless. She took a deep breath and realized that this was not even a quarter of what she was capable of. She believed she was done until another troop of monsters approached her. Frowning, she turned to the final member of her group and told him to flee so that at least one of them would escape. Give him time to flee. The guy's face was sweating. He said that staying was the best course of action and that he couldn't. She was a wizard after all. Jupiter took a combative Saint Dan and requested again. He explained to her the second guideline of mercenary survival, which is to constantly remain near the squad's mage, even without a horse. He frowned and said that he had a far better chance of surviving if he stayed with her. She considered what he had said. The child's plan worked. The child used his spear to strike. After falling to the ground, the creatures got back up. Instead of killing them, he used his spear to force them away. The recruit turned to face her, scowling and yelling that he would do everything in his power to keep them at bay while she readied her next spell. The archer unleashed arrows from his crossbow in the meantime. From inside the castle walls, Damien offered assistance. Even though the child was surrounded by monsters, not all of the adversaries could be stopped. The mage was getting ready to launch another assault. The boy with the spear was hit in the chest before Jupiter could muster enough energy to produce a single lightning bolt. She cursed as spears pierced the boy's body. Lightning struck multiple armors as the spell was being cast. Jupiter stood in front of the remaining members of her group and the corpses of the fallen armor. If she had gathered enough energy a few seconds sooner, could she have saved him? The man coughed up blood while still conscious. She was too old to be affected by death. She turned to face him, lowering her head, and asked what the first mercenary survival rule was. Silently, he gathered his strength and gazed at the mage. In response, he advised against accepting a position that pays an unusually high salary. His final remarks were directed at his mother as his eyes rolled back. The sky was filled with black clouds. Jupiter was being approached by another group of monsters. She claimed that all of his survival guidelines were incorrect. If he followed them, he would not be successful as a mercenary. The maid balled her fist in preparation for another assault, threatening to pull her if he desired wealth. Return the hand. The mercenary delivered a blow that was accompanied by an amazing release of energy when she yelled that if he wanted glory, he should only take on work that is extremely dangerous and pays well. This kind of force struck multiple opponents at once. Breathing heavily and holding her hand with the other, she continued, "You need to stay as far away from the mages as possible. The mage will take full responsibility." Blood trickled down her shaking hand. The AG went on to say that he should never have become a mercenary if he wanted to survive. Jupiter pulled out a cigar and used her trembling hand to clench it in her teeth. She attempted to light it, but found she lacked the necessary energy. She was being approached by a group of monsters. She put her hands down. She believed that receiving a large salary would make life easier. The mage, with a cigar in her teeth and a smile on her face, believed that this was how it would all end. She was told not to move by a voice behind her. There was the sound of hoops hitting the floor. Lucas drew his sword and got ready to strike. He dispatched a group of monsters close to the mage with a single blow. She was taken aback by her abandonment. Sig stretching his hand to the side. The knight gazed at her some time ago inside the fortress's walls. The main character insisted that all of his insane soldiers concentrate on rebuilding the kill zone. Enraged, he pleaded with Jupiter in his mind to continue the battle. He used all of his strength to strike his subordinate, insisting that he awaken. Already, he glanced menacingly at the soldiers and saw that the size of the monster was making them nervous. His unbreakable commander ability came into play at that precise moment, causing his hand to clench into a fist. The knight declared out loud that he was no longer afraid of anything. As he considered what had happened to his subordinates, the brunette's face was drenched in sweat. He realized it was all about his unwavering commander skill as he gazed at the brightly lit hand. After all, he discovered that all soldiers within a 10-meter radius were immune to mental debuffs thanks to this ability. He turned sharply and yelled at Lucas. He told him, keeping a close eye on him, that he would restore the kill zone in addition to calming the soldiers. When he proposed that Lucas lead the rescue team, a drop of sweat started to trickle down his cheek. In order to save the Jupiter squad, he made the decision that his partner should open the gate. Lucas decides to send the main character to the Valley of Death. Because he believes he is acting foolishly, he scowled and vowed to get back to the master as soon as he could. Ash recalled that he didn't even hesitate as he watched his partner go. He came to the realization that he truly trusted him as a result. The fortress let out screams. The brunette persisted in attempting to bring his soldiers back to life. Lucas, meanwhile, charged into combat. He attacked all the monsters at once. The gray-haired heroine had blood all over his face. He gave her a displeased look in return. He suggested that she stand more firmly. The man grabbed by the jacket. Together with the woman, he leaped onto the horse. He galloped ahead. The knights started to radiate mana. Suddenly, one of them hurled a spear at them. The weapon's tips were pointed directly at them. With his sword resting behind him, Lucas sliced them into pieces. The heroine with gray hair turned to face him. She asked him if he would like to meet his beautiful granddaughter. While bowing her head, the blonde gave her a menacing look in return. When he saw that she was still capable of making jokes like that, there were still a lot of monsters waiting for them. So he suggested that she use them to replenish her magic. The woman laughed at him with a menacing smile. She recalled that Lucas was only kind to his master, but she is aware that when he is not with the prince on horseback, he turns as cold as ice. She expressed gratitude to the man for saving her. When she heard this, the blonde reminded her that he was just carrying out His Highness's directives. He heard some noises as he turned to face the dead men. He expressed regret for being late. Looking back, the gray-haired heroine implied that they were sorry. They made their way to the fortress after defeating every monster. When she saw that the spirit had not been so furious in a long time, she scowled deeply. He called forth monsters, and they exploded. Because of his unwavering commander skill, the protagonist was able to restore the kill zone. He was relieved that they had made it back safely when he saw Lucas coming. Recalling the pictures of his four partners, he came to the conclusion that his confidence in the gaming experience was the reason he lost them. He recalled that he had to control the soldiers' anxieties and perplexity by visualizing the player icon. He is aware that their emotions are more nuanced and varied here. He was reminded of the startled horse and realized that he had not anticipated their fear. Sweat trickled down his cheek in a beat. He came to the conclusion that he would actually need to consider more factors. The artillery cannon's flames spread far from the fort. It surrounded wooden shields. Ash saw that the kill zone was beginning to disintegrate. A horde of monsters came toward the fortress. He showed off his teeth. Even though he only intended to use one artillery fire, he eventually realized that they would have to fight along the fortress wall. He saw that there weren't many monsters left to defeat when he saw the system. Notification. He thinks they'll be able to accomplish their objective. Presuming he still had control over the battlefield, he introduced the sinister spirit. Lucas came up to him and told him about the Lady Jupiter's rescue. When the prince heard this, he realized that his partner had grudgingly given him a title. The blonde bowed his head. Even though he disapproved of Jupiter's dismissal, his superior felt that he had done the right thing by treating her with respect. Glancing back at her, Ash acknowledged that he was relieved to see her again. The woman expressed regret to him for her numerous errors. When she reminded him that the recruits died in vain because of her, blood spurted from his hand. The brunette turned to face her and informed her that this was not her fault. He was aware that she was unaware of the monster's unexpected appearance, which drove all the horses insane. Jupiter held up her hand and reiterated that she was to blame for this. She believed that her response should have been appropriate. She vowed to pay him back as she stood on the battlefield with so much experience under her belt and clenched her fist. As she threatened to chop off his head, a monster came toward them. Ash told her to concentrate on her recuperation after hearing this, since he would require her strength. The knights soon came charging at them. He raised his head as the cannons were pointed at them. Since the kill zone was no longer serving its purpose, the commander ordered the soldiers to cease using the cannons. Black smoke filled the sky. Demi and turned to face the protagonist, who suggested that he take a nap. He took hold of his shoulder and informed him that he had a more formidable foe. He asked the boy to regain some of his strength while glancing at him. Meanwhile, the adversaries arrived at the fortress's walls. They used their hands to scrape at it. They realized they couldn't break through the wall after sticking their fingers into it. A few of the monsters started scaling the fortress's wall. With a deep frown, the commander told the soldiers to get ready for close quarters. The knights told him they were prepared and armed themselves. The main character insisted that the close combat team advance. They took a step forward. At the same time, their commander made the decision to fight using only physical strength and no magic. Sweat was all over the brunette's face. His army charged into combat. The monsters had already ascended to the top of the wall of the fort. Ash realized that a real war was about to start at that precise moment. The monster pack. Sweat was all over the soldiers' faces. The monsters raised his hand and sank their claws into the wall as the commander ordered them to get ready. They had to wait a little while longer, the commander informed them. The monsters that were coming toward them exuded a sinister aura. Deeply frowning, Ash insisted that the soldiers drop the shells right away. Together, the knights raised the barrel. They threw its contents at their rivals. These barrels contained steel, rock fragments, and other remnants of the reinforcement. The monsters dropped to the floor. These barrels of rubble were previously piled on top of the fort by the protagonist. His opponent broke apart. Some of them were able to get back up after falling. So when they hit the ground, some noises were heard. When the commander saw their obnoxious will to live, he bared his teeth. After all, they kept climbing in spite of all the falling debris. The soldiers started poking them with spears. He made the decision to rearrange the celebration after Ash insisted that they take them down while they were logging in. He connected the Jupiter team to the main network. A notification about the team's synergy being activated showed up. In the commander's mind, a schematic of the combatants materialized. When he discovered that the element's attack power had increased by 20%, his pupils dilated. As the soldiers saw the monster's hand, the spear broke in two. The enemy's approach was announced loudly. The rivals were positioned in opposition to one another. The monsters started to emit a menacing mana. The main character started to perspire. He saw that the conflict was no longer one-sided. The soldiers rearmed themselves. Their commander questioned their ability to manage it. The monster's armor was pierced by the knight's sword blade. On the battlefield, something shone brightly. Lucas leaped directly onto the adversaries. He scowled deeply and moved his leg aside. He demanded that the opponents be restrained by the knights who stood motionless after declaring that he would personally destroy the monsters. With menacing smiles, they bowed their heads in front of him. The main character made the decision that his partners ought to take this action. He saw that his subjects needed to strengthen. He feels that their only option is to fall, get back up, fight, and prevail. He turned his head and insisted that Lily turn on the artifact so the character could move more quickly. Glancing back at him, the girl promised to do it immediately. To activate the speed artifact, she held out her hand. The soldiers were impacted by her man magic. There was a notification that all of the comrades' movement speed had increased by 5%. When Ash opened X's details, he saw that he was currently equipped with skills. They would aid them in close quarters, he realized. The monsters were attacked by his squad. He decided to do his best after giving them the order to push them off the fortress's walls after taking a menacing look at what was happening. There were black clouds all over the sky. The monsters were still being fought by the soldiers. Lucas viciously flashed his teeth. With a single blow, he cut the opponents. The main character recalled that Lucas possessed the ability of an iron will strike while observing what was taking place. He recalled how he handled the adversaries by himself when he saw his strong aura. He saw that it wouldn't be sufficient for them as he watched the fight. He realized they were losing to the enemy when one of his soldiers was hurt. Loudly, the armored man clutching his comrade demanded that the injured be replaced. Examining the monsters, the main character became aware that his wounded soldiers were getting worse. When Damien made the decision to go back to the front lines, he attempted to stop him, unlike their opponents. Ultimately, he feels that, like Jupiter, this boy ought to use his strength against the boss. He turned his head and considered his options. After witnessing his soldiers' self-defense, he made the decision to figure out how to lower the death toll. He is aware that they need to eliminate the remaining adversaries. After all, he went over to his squad. His face was illuminated by a brilliant flash. A beam of fire emerged from the heavens. All the soldiers were consumed by its flames. Lily was the source of all this strong energy. Her commander ordered her to use her magic, her mouth hanging open. She reminded him that she had always been a mage as she turned to face him. Ash pledged to advance her after hearing this. Later, she let out a long breath and pleaded with him to fire her. He now assumed that she had used up too much mana to use fire, which is why she had said this. He promised to give her a substantial bonus after seizing her throne. With a menacing grin, he insisted that she add more flames. After hearing this, she reminded him that once she had used up all of her mana, she wanted to retire. He asked her to do it in spite of this. She screamed at the top of her lungs and used her magic one last time. Her magic had increased by 25%, and everything around her was in flames. He called her a flamethrower, while standing behind her, and insisted that she splash out her mana once more. She insisted that he at least treat her like a human being at that point. By swinging their weapons, their army was able to repel the adversaries. Lucas slashed the adversaries with his sword while clenching his teeth. Because Lily used her fire to destroy every enemy, the commander attempted to give her a potion. The monster started to emit a menacing aura. Its body was shattered. The soldiers were perplexed by what was going on. When they realized they had stopped the enemies, they raised their hands. Their commander then came over and warned them that the battle was far from over. The blonde scowled and let out a deep breath. They still needed to defeat one more monster. So the protagonist insisted that they keep their guard up. The creature dropped to the floor. Their armor shot skyward. They were spirit-driven. He tightened his grip on the sword handle. Blue light started to sparkle in his eye. It started to radiate a sinister aura. The ground was pierced by a brilliant beam of light. The beast leaped onto the battlefield. His enormous sword landed next to the soldiers. Unbelieving that the first location's boss was in front of him, Ash grabbed his head. The monster took the weapon with assurance. He went up to the protagonist. The man's hand shuddered in terror. With his teeth bared, he balled it into a fist. The boss of the first stage of the 25th level was the only person in front of him, so he made the decision to stop being afraid. From the cannons, the soldiers fired. The commander ordered them not to save shells, so they kept attacking the enemy with fire. The boss was directly hit by the shot. His eyes glistened. He moved forward menacingly. The commander ordered the soldiers to move quickly before the monster reached the fort's walls after flames engulfed his armor. The ghostly knight took a step forward in spite of the flames that engulfed the sky, which was covered in black clouds. Lily balled her hand into a fist. The commander demanded that she activate the third artifact after calling out to her and giving her a menacing look. The magic ball started to radiate strong energy. Thanks to the girl, the multiplier was activated, which resulted in a 100% increase in the character's magical spell's effect. Jupiter's energy was all over her body, making her spells more potent. With a menacing smile, she tightly closed her eyes. This was the reality, she acknowledged. During her heyday, pointing at the boss, the commander insisted that she attack him as she had done previously. He was warned to exercise caution by the woman who stepped forward. The dark sky glistened. Jupiter reminded the calm commander that no one would compensate him for receiving an electric shock when a strong electric spark suddenly appeared. Her body was the source of these sparks. They covered the boss's entire body. His armor started to shatter. Examining him more closely, the main character saw a deep frown in his soul core. He yelled at Damien. The boy grasped the projectile's handles firmly. His eyes reflected the target. He pulled the projectile's handle when the commander ordered him to fire. He pointed the spear directly at the creature. It penetrated the boss's only core. His cold heart started to fracture. Damien joyfully clenched his fist as his spear broke it into pieces. He had a great shot, Ash said. The monster's body started to release ominous energy, but his eyes glistened when he realized that even such a blow was insufficient. The brunette's pupils narrowed. The enemy firmly grasped the sword handle, swung it as hard as he could. The commander is aware that the boss can demolish the fort's walls after bringing his sword down on them. Growing even more enraged, he yelled at Jupiter and insisted that she deliver one more blow. Her body ignited once more. She believes that in the midst of a thunderstorm, the monster shouldn't have raised his weapon so high. Sparks covered the boss's sword. When she saw that the enemy was merely requesting that she strike him with lightning, she scowled deeply. The boss's energy started to cover her body. It gleamed brightly. He was directly struck by a strong spark. He let out a loud roar before aiming his weapon directly at the adversary. Terrified, Ash insisted that every soldier flee. They looked up. Lucas attacked him and demanded that he leave the battlefield. After he told them to flee from the sword, the earth shattered. A black fog rose sat on the ground as the soldiers flew to the sides. The main character acknowledged that his back tightened. His commander questioned him about what had happened to the wall, while his partner asked him if he was all right. The mages observed what was taking place. A massive sword slashed through the wall in surprise. The boss's eye flashed menacingly. The sides of his armor flew away. The protagonist realized they had finally killed the ghost knight when they saw how the spirit vanished into thin air. The broken armor started to emit a menacing aura. Lucas went up to the commander and reminded him that being on the edge of the wall was risky. Ash recognized that he had previously observed this pattern as he observed the energy flow. He thinks that this is how a terrifying energy surrounded him from all sides and caused a flash of anger when he realized he was going to die. He was aware that this outburst of terror, bewilderment, and insanity could drive him insane without causing harm. His eyes glistened. This was the beginning of human territory, he declared menacingly. He used the ability of an unstoppable commander after extending his hand and demanding that the monster leave the area. A cloud of menacing mana started to absorb his energy. The boss let out a loud howl. The air was filled with his spirit. When the soldiers considered the fate of the giant and his ghosts, their jaws dropped open, reaching the fortress's wall. Since the prince was able to eliminate the monsters, they believed that everything had ended. Through the black clouds, rays of light emerged. They started to scatter. The fortress's red flag was illuminated by the sun. Even though the giant's sword had shattered their fortress wall, Ash declared with pride that they had triumphed. He thinks they will keep winning, frightening the monsters with their ability to survive. He saw that the fear in his soldiers' eyes was starting to fade. When he saw his happy partner, he saw how the joy of victory triumphed over fear with confidence. Ash waved his hand, wondering if his ability to inspire others or his passive skill was the reason they were able to accomplish this. He said, frowning deeply, that his partners should keep killing monsters in order to survive. He thinks he was just yelling from the bottom of his heart. Sunlight shone on the walls of his fortress. He saw a notification from the system regarding the clearing of the first location where Jupiter had contributed the most. The city went dark. Attendees flocked to the city center for the festival. Raising his glass, Ash congratulated everyone on a well-earned victory and on keeping the fort safe from adversaries. With a slight frown, he advised everyone to raise their mucks. The men lifted their eyeglasses. They applauded. The young man promised to cover all of their expenses, so they could have as much alcohol as they wanted. The men's glasses clinked. The celebration started. The musicians performed on their instruments. With joy, the man with dark hair continued to pour. On a hot frying pan, the food sizzled. The grill was used to fry the meat. The men engaged in arm wrestling. The young man watched from the sidelines as the knight raised the winner's hand and declared that the newcomer had won. The hero grinned a little when the loser requested another round. Lucas went up to him and inquired about his feelings. The blonde asked him to eat. After grinning and saying that His Majesty had not eaten a crumb, Ash concurred with him. He glanced at his glass. The blonde went on to say that his expression didn't matter because it matched the commander, which resulted in victory. He leaned over to tell His Majesty that he should be a little happier because the man had stopped 1,000 living armors without suffering significant casualties. The boy spat out the contents of his mouth, and the entire street heard the cry of the knight, who inquired about His Highness's well-being. Ash brought the drink to his mouth and stated that, despite the fact that there were no significant losses, the hero responded that everything was good, but the drink did not taste the way he had anticipated. He opened his mouth, scowled, and questioned whether it was actually beer because it seemed at least tasty. After calming down, he stated that there were no significant losses, but this did not imply that there were none at all. And ours consider the picture of a dying soldier and conclude that, since every life is significant and valued by all, it doesn't matter how much is lost. The man imagined a fortress wall and reasoned that they couldn't defend everyone or something. This was a cruel game because the idea was so arrogant. However, he released his gaze and concluded the thought by stating that they would not have perished if he had been more cautious. He visualized himself in combat and realized that this battle was distinct from training since he had the power to alter the result. After placing the drink on the table, the man concluded the thought by stating that he was aware of this, which only made it worse. He clarified that this was exactly what he was thinking after the blonde looked up and said, "The guy still did a great job, so he shouldn't be so upset." There was a massive bonfire inside a log structure. The knight continued by saying that no matter what the hero said, his regrets would not go away. After taking in the celebrations, Lucas turned to His Highness and announced that they were being held in honor of victory. If His Highness was, the soldiers were not pleased. The knight turned to the commander, grinning, and remarked, at least now he needed to rejoice with them because this was also work. The heroes smiled slightly as they thought about what he had said. Suddenly, 𝗏𝗏𝗃 appeared behind him and yelled in agreement with the blonde, startling him. Mourning the victims was definitely important, he said, lifting the plate of food. In his head, the young man asked him what he needed. 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃 gave him the plate and explained that he brought a plate of vegetables because eating only meat was harmful. In response, the young man said he hadn't had any meat yet. The fair-haired man gave His Highness a big smile and congratulated him on clearing the first location, saying that although it was difficult, he succeeded. Ash scowled a little. The commander should carry on in the same spirit, the young man continued. A tomato was taken by His Highness. He raised the vegetable to his lips. 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃 held up his hand. The hero inquired about his top's activities. The boy cried out that His Highness was choking on vegetables and had not eaten anything. The town's residents' cries for the commander's forgiveness filled the streets. They rushed to him with food and tears in their eyes. One of the men expressed his disbelief that they had made the prince, who was rumored to only eat meat, eat vegetables. The young man pondered the nature of these rumors and the previous existence of this Ash. With a deep frown, one of the men called out to the crowd, telling them to bring alcohol and meat. the residents of the town giving each other hugs. The man kept having food and drinks to celebrate. The young man, who had intended to watch the battle in a quiet, dark corner, scowled and wondered how it had come to this. Abruptly, someone tugged his clothing. The girl with red hair clung to him with a shaking hand. When she got intoxicated, the guy wondered. She abruptly started crying and requested to be fired. Lily snatched his clothing. The man grinned and said he wouldn't do that. So she should put in a lot of effort and remember that nobody was fired during these trying times. He then offered to pay more. When the guys in the hoods recognized the woman, they were shocked. They gave her a back roll. The girl reiterated her desire to quit while placing her hands in front of her. Damien laughed and grinned menacingly. The man turned to face him and considered what had transpired this time. The boy said that the water was a little bitter after, setting down the glass and settling into a chair. His Highness questioned who had given the child a drink after responding that it was not water. He was startled to see Jupiter pouring the boy a drink. So he yelled loudly and asked the man what he was doing. With a cigar in his mouth, the elderly man inquired about the type of boy he was referring to. Due to the boy's status as a fully qualified mercenary, you ought to know how to spend money, smoke, and consume alcohol. With malice, His Highness gritted his teeth. The man said, closing his eyes, that he would teach the boy well because he was like a grandson to him. The boy yelled and questioned why he was imparting such knowledge to his grandson. With a small laugh, Damien rested his head on the boy's shoulder. His Highness grinned and remarked that because the boy dared to lay his head on the prince, he had grown braver. The boy said, lowering his eyes sorrowfully, that the face of his deceased friend was always in front of him when he was by himself. He described how he could not stop thinking about the day he would die because his heart was tormented by guilt for being alive. However, he gave a small smile and concluded by stating that he felt better when he was with the prince. He collapsed headfirst into the table the following moment. The prince believed that it had nothing to do with his uniqueness. The man concluded by stating that it was all about the passive skill, but he was unable to disclose it. After recalling how he had affected the boy, Jupiter grinned and remarked that she felt her magic was stronger under the prince's command for some reason. She then inquired as to whether this was due to the leader's life. The young man conceptualized the relationship between the heroes and believed that it was all due to his abilities and synergy. With a 25% boost, he grinned broadly, looked up, and realized that there was nothing he could say to her. The blonde caught the prince's attention. The soldier claimed that his doubts vanished and his body became quick and light when he was with His Highness. All of this, however, was made possible by His Highness's leadership skills and character. It was probably so, Lucas said, raising his hand. After giving it some thought, the prince questioned whether such a response could be suitable for a model knight. The people drank to the prince and their fallen and living allies, banging their glasses on the table. His Highness was surrounded by the crowd. The boy asked what was wrong with them with a nervous frown before admitting that he felt horrible. They lifted his spirits and prevented the prince, who was well known for his capacity to consume alcohol for weeks, from consuming a single mug. The young man scowled as he considered the reputation and lifestyle of this abandoned prince. Fluffy LED clouds drifted over the building's roofs. The residents of the town yelled that they were deserving of death. The prince told them to stop talking and to stand up. He was asked to drink alcohol by the man. Grabbing the mug, he scowled and yelled if they were happy now. He also said that since they had made their commander drink, they should be aware of what would happen next, then gave the order to fill every mug. The alcohol-filled glasses were placed on the table. People wanted to drink until they passed out in celebration of the festival. The boy looked up and thought that they sang, talked, and drank very little while the moon shone brightly in the night sky. Because the victory night went on, the door opened. The boy claimed to be intoxicated. The prince took a seat on the bed. In front of him, 3 chests materialized. It was time for him to open them, he said, grinning. The boy wondered what color it would be as he put his hand on the lid. From within SSR rank, a brilliant yellow glow emerged. The boy was startled to see it. He removed a black glove from inside and believed it to be both max level and SSR rank. The prince gave a small smile. Throwing the glove, he trembled a little. He loudly cursed as the glove's description appeared in the system window. reporting that the item's value increased each stat by 1%. The fact that he received a 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃, a consolation item, out of all the different items of this rank infuriated the man. The man envisioned a slot machine and believed that the roulette determined how much damage these gloves could do. He occasionally used them on streams to entertain viewers. However, in practice, they are totally worthless. At least I got something, he said as he approached the item. After putting them on, the young man remarked that he couldn't discard them or give them to anyone. He went on to say that their rarity must be the reason they are so pleasant to the touch. The boy was depressed, but he had to be hopeful because he saw them and considered the possibility that he might win big at roulette. When the time came, there were many cheat items that could make life easier if you were with him, he said, scowling angrily. The palace was surrounded by a dark sky. Despite being given a rare gold item, the boy cursed loudly, tossed and turned all night, and hardly slept at all. By morning, the castle was illuminated by the evening sun. The boy looked in surprise at the open door. Angry due to his headache, Lucas greeted the prince with dry lips and a pale face. The boys exchanged weary glances. When His Highness inquired about how the night had gone, he replied that he ought to have taken a nap in the morning. The blonde said he couldn't just lie in bed because it was His Highness's private night and covered his mouth with his fist to stop throwing up. The man brought a tray of tea, smiled, and wished the prince a good morning. The prince assumed the man had probably consumed too much alcohol. His Highness pondered the reason behind the bespectacled man's constant vigor. Ash and Lucas gazed joyfully at the tray. Ader told them to drink it all the way down because it was simply warm water with honey. The prince picked up a cup. The entire jug was tipped into the knight's mouth. Ash claimed that it made him come to life and that he then decided it was time to begin getting ready for the next phase. The men stepped outside. The prince asked how long it would take to fix it after folding his arms across his chest and stating that they wouldn't be able to stop monsters, let alone wild animals, in their current state. The employee scowled and stated that it would take longer than 2 weeks because he had to raise this sword first. He glanced at the second location's description in the system window. There were 9 days and 20 hours until the start, according to the sign. The prince scowled and declared that the soldiers who were unharmed would assist in building the walls beginning tomorrow. The blonde accepted his directive. Ash requested to be done as soon as possible. When he heard the question about reinforcements, the young man wearing glasses looked at him in surprise. He replied that the soldiers sent to the central regions would return tomorrow, and the neighboring city would send troops soon. He thought he could handle everything else after. The man touched his chin and told him he would have to wait until tomorrow to see at least some progress. However, he was not in charge of the reinforcement squad, so all he could do was hope they made it safely. He asked the knight to do everything they could, and asked the theater to notify him if anything happened. As he peered up at the wreckage, "What did he mean?" the blonde asked. The prince grinned and declared that the dungeon's monster breeding ground would be destroyed. With a composed expression, the knight asked him if the Black Lake was their objective. It was confirmed by His Highness. He gave the location of the dungeon and explained that it was time to switch up the game's genre. So this time they were going under the lake with the rest of the team. Night descended upon the palace from tower defense to the dungeon. "We're done for today," the prince exclaimed. The subordinates made their way out, after telling the team members that they would embark on an expedition tomorrow morning. The man realized that it would be simpler for them to witness everything firsthand than for him to explain everything 100 times. Grinning, Damien turned to face His Highness and bid him farewell. Ash thought the dungeon was meant for 5, and he mentally apologized to Lily. He asked the man with the glasses to get the expedition's provisions ready. Ayar inquired about the specific preparations he needed to make. With a frown, the prince requested that canned goods, camping equipment, a potion, and more be prepared. When he heard that he needed to get lanterns and torches ready, the young man with fair hair grinned. They needed everything that could be illuminated, Ash continued. The guys went outside to the estate's backyard the following morning. Jupiter asked where they were going after, scowling in dissatisfaction and saying that it seemed to be something serious. The man used his power to lift stone blocks into the air, telling her that she would soon witness a gate appear in the sky. The fact that this was teleportation magic shocked the woman. The young man put his hand over his mouth. According to Jupiter, this kind of magic vanished a few hundred years ago. The prince believed that as things developed, they would learn everything. He scowled at his group and announced that they would teleport to the monster nest beneath the Black Lake. The men listened to him in silence. The young man explained that it was the location of the kingdom of monsters. He displayed empty armor and explained that the only way to stop the invasion was to investigate the area to determine why monsters were coming from there. With a deep frown, the prince continued. It would put an end to the invasion forever. Then believed that the real objective of the game was to eliminate the monsters. Source: he chose the lake on the teleport control panel and told the boys to follow him because he would give them instructions along the way. The blonde let out a cry and requested that he go first. His Highness entered through the portal. The blonde watched it despite being shocked. The characters could level up by gaining experience from all kinds of battles. And system notifications appeared in the air to let them know that the teleportation had started and that they were being strengthened by raising their level. After concluding that they shouldn't worry too much, the young man questioned whether it would be possible to offer him some practical guidance rather than the obvious. The boys took a step on the floor. The woman scowled as she realized where she was. They were standing on a pond's edge. This was the same lake, the woman continued. The man inquired as to whether she had ever visited. 20 years ago, when the royal soldiers were still at the crossroads, they were ordered to fill the lake with earth. The woman said, looking forward. The prince said, "It seems like a fool was at the HM 20 years ago." After asking her if they had truly attempted to fill this enormous lake with earth, recalling her earlier trip to the lake, Jupiter claimed that the entire magic squad was involved and that they attempted to raise the earth and fill the lake using magic. However, the young man wanted to know what had happened. Of course it was impossible, the woman said, recalling how the magicians controlled the earth and the air. The water's surface is covered in ripples. The woman went on to say that the lake would always absorb rock and earth, regardless of how much of them sank to the bottom. With a deep scowl, she said that there were rumors circulating among the royal army that the lake was linked to hell. The silhouettes of monsters materialized in her imagination. According to the woman, the army withdrew after the monsters started to appear in large numbers following the first week of attempts. The plan didn't work out, and she soon found herself at the lake for the first time. After glancing at the water's surface, the young man gave the order for everyone to remain vigilant. Lily sobbed in terror. Damien scowled with assurance. The prince declared that they would delve further. They were prompted by the system to enter Lake Kingdom. The young man gave a positive response. She asked them once more if they wanted to proceed. After a warning that they would not be able to return until the next stopping point was opened, the young man concluded that he was being scared by the system. He asked her in his head if she thought he had played this game once or twice. While pointing his finger at the window, a whirlpool formed as the water's surface bubbled and swirled. After investigating it, the young man concluded that this was the dungeon's entrance. Above the surface, there are faint water splashes. Under the water, the prince sank. The dungeon started to load. He was advised by the system to always be on guard. The man's initial impression was that it was dark because he could only hear sounds rather than see anything. The noise level in the area increased steadily. He felt as though the darkness was getting closer. The blonde scowled, calling out to His Highness. The prince said he was unable to worry and then requested that the peace be maintained. Turn on the light and turn. A torch was lit by the night. Every light source was turned on by the guys. The room was lit by beams of fire. The light gradually went out. The girl asked what it was, raising her eyebrows in terror. Lucas and Jupiter both scowled. The prince extended his hand in front of him. What was this place? The blonde inquired. The boys were in a large hall. His Highness informed him that this was an underwater dungeon, a kingdom lost among the waters. Ash scowled and said that they should carefully and gradually clear out the nest of monsters. That's it for this episode. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, feel good and take care.